Chapter 2048. 2048 Separation. What happened? Why did I see the Eternal God Master kneeling in front of the two girls just now? Am I seeing things? What's going on? What's the relationship between the two goddesses in the Dragon Palace and the Divine Leaf God Master? Why is it suddenly blocked? What's going on up there? On Earth, everyone looked surprised when they saw the terrifying Eternal God Master suddenly kneel in front of the two goddesses in the Dragon Palace and spread out his arms. What was going on? Unfortunately, the 7 old men covered up what was happening here. Walala! At this moment, the gods behind them saw the 7 old men kneel down and call out respectfully, and their faces were also filled with shock. Greetings, Your Highness! They hurriedly leaned forward and knelt in the air, bowing to Hua Kair. Aunt! The mighty middle-aged man opened his mouth and bowed. Kneel down and pay your respects to Aunt! He saw his son's stunned expression behind him and immediately shouted. Greetings, Aunties! The young man quickly knelt on the ground and shouted. There was a father between his seniority and Hua and Kair. Naturally, he had to kneel down. Hua Kair's father? At this moment, Wang Xian, who was trapped in the cage, was filled with astonishment when he saw this scene. He did not expect that the Eternal Lord who came over was actually the biological father of the two girls. One had to know that the two girls had fallen for hundreds of thousands of years before they were resurrected by chance. What a coincidence! Wang Xian mumbled to himself. When he saw this scene, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. With the relationship between Hua and Kair, the crisis that they encountered this time could be resolved smoothly. Otherwise, he really didn't know what to do. Daddy, all right. Don't cry. At this moment, Hua wiped the tears of the Divine Leaf God with her slightly red eyes and said with a smile. Daddy is so happy. Divine Leaf Master didn't feel embarrassed at all. He gently touched their faces with both hands. When we go back later, your mother will be very, very happy if she knows that you are still alive, Divine Leaf Master said happily. Mommy is still alive? Hua was excited when she heard his words and immediately said, Yes. Although your mother didn't break through to the Eternal God Lord realm, I obtained some treasures in the past to extend your mother's life. God Lord Shinai smiled. What about your brother? Kair hesitated for a moment and asked. Your brother is old, but he has lived for 100,000 years. He didn't feel sad at all before he died. Your mother and I feel the most guilty about you two girls. Now that you have appeared in front of us, we are very happy. The God of Divine Leaves had a smile on his face. Come, let father hug you. Remember when you two little girls ran out of the house to play? You must be this big too. He stood up slowly and held a little girl in each hand. He was as happy as a child. Hee. Huart Siley also smiled and held his neck. Oh right, father, let me introduce someone to you. Dad, let them go quickly. Hua and Kair quickly said when they saw Wang Xian and the rest who were trapped. All right. The God of Divine Leaves nodded immediately and looked at Wang Xian and the rest. The cage was immediately released. At the same time, the huge wooden claw in the sky slowly placed the Dragon Palace into the ocean. Dad, let me introduce to you. This is the person I met after my sister and I woke up. At that time, we were just a baby and he raised us up. He is our dad on Earth. Huar jumped down from the arms of the God of Leaves and came to Wang Xian's side. She held his arm and introduced him. Dad on Earth? The God of Leaves was slightly stunned. There was a hint of jealousy in his eyes. However, when he saw how happy his daughter was, a smile appeared on his face. Hello, big brother. Wang Xian opened his mouth and hesitated for a moment. Then, he extended his hand with a smile. Hello. I'm really grateful to you for what happened to you in Euro. If you need anything in the boundless galaxy in the future, you can look for me. He immediately extended his hand and said with a smile on his face. Well, Yuan and Euro, let me bring you guys home. Why don't you bring this planet to our eternal divine leaf? When we get there, I'll thank you properly, little brother, the Divine Leaf Master said to Huar, Kair, and Wang Xian. That's right, old Wang. Why don't you bring Earth to our biological father's place? Eternal God, we will take care of you in the future. Hee hee. Huar immediately said with a smile. Go to the Eternal Divine Leaf? Wang Xian was slightly taken aback. A hesitant look appeared on his face. He had heard of the name Eternal Divine Leaf before he came here. It was one of the 5 major forces of the Eternal Divine Leaf in the East. If it were the Eternal Leaf of the East, the development of Earth would not be too bad just based on Huar and Kair's relationship. Even the Dragon Palace would not dare to offend anyone in the entire boundless galaxy due to Huar and Kair's relationship. No, we have already confirmed where Earth is going. Wang Xian still rejected Huar and Kair's suggestion. With the current strength of the Dragon Palace, there was no need to rely on any force. As long as the Eternal Lord did not come personally, he would not be afraid. Furthermore, it might not be long before the Dragon Palace would be able to contend with the Eternal Lord. Going to the planet of the supernatural continent was the best choice and would allow for better development. You 2 girls should go back with your father first to visit your mother. If I have time, I will look for you. He looked at Huar and Kair and continued. No, why can't you come with us? That's right. Huar shook his arm reluctantly. All right. The Dragon Palace has its own development. I will look for you after settling down in the Dragon Palace, Wang Xian said to the 2 girls helplessly. All right then. You must promise to look for us as soon as possible. Huar pouted her lips at him. Don't worry. Wang Xian nodded his head. Hee hee, I have the celestial communication stone plate here. You can use the stone plate to contact us from any corner of the boundless celestial domain. Seeing how his daughter was so dependent on other men, God Master Shinai was extremely jealous. He felt as if his things had been robbed. However, he still took out 3 communication stone tablets and handed them to Wang Xian and his daughter. Thank you. Wang Xian nodded and took them. He then exchanged a few words with Huar Kair. We've agreed that you will come back to look for us after settling down on Earth. Chapter 2049. 2049-2049 arrived. Old Wang, don't forget our agreement. In the sky, Huar and Kair waved at Wang Xian. Wang Xian nodded with a smile and waved at them. You 2 little girls, hurry up and leave. Guan Shuqing and the rest had flown over just now. After receiving all the news, they joked with the 2 little girls. HMPH, you bunch of narrow-minded women. It's not like we're snatching men from you. Huar Kair glared at them and said, Hee hee, if you bring us some good stuff when you come, we won't bother you 2 girls. The group of girls waved at them. Huar Kair smiled and looked at her father. Dad, let's go. I miss Mom. All right. Let's go. The smile on the God of Divine Leaves never stopped. He nodded immediately. He pointed forward and a black hole appeared in front of them. Huar Kair turned around and smiled at Wang Xian and the rest. She followed the God of Divine Leaves into the black hole. At the back, the gods of Eternal Divine Leaf took a deep look at Wang Xian and the rest before following them into the black hole. This time, although they did not find the Divine Tomb and did not obtain any treasures, they had obtained an existence that made the Eternal Divine Lord even more precious. The young man had a smile on his face. He had contributed greatly to the encounter between the 2 grandaunts and his great-grandfather. This contribution was even greater than finding the Divine Tomb here. His great-grandfather would definitely reward him well this time. The 2 grandaunts have returned. Based on the great-grandfather and great-grandmother's love for the 2 grandaunts, I reckon that in the future, the entire Eternal Divine Leaf will belong to the 2 grandaunts. I'll have to please the 2 grandaunts properly in the future. He thought to himself, thinking about how to please the 2 grandaunts in the future. What he didn't know was that his father had the same thoughts at this moment. I didn't expect these 2 girls to be the daughters of the God Lord of the boundless star field. This time, it's all thanks to these 2 girls. Seeing Huar Kair and the others leave, the group of girls sighed. Without these two girls, it's a lot less fun. Feng Luan smiled. Let's go. Let's continue flying towards the direction of the supernatural continent, Wan Xian said as they returned to the Dragon Palace. Earth was activated once again as they flew towards the direction of the supernatural continent. It's over. Has the Eternal God left? It seems like there are people in the Dragon Palace who are relatives of the Eternal God. It's good that everything is fine. It's good that everything is fine. The Eternal God is really terrifying. I reckon that he can easily destroy Earth. Everyone on Earth watched the matter end in confusion. They were both surprised and slightly relieved. The Eternal God Lord was so powerful that Earth was not something the Dragon Palace could contend against. It was a great fortune for them to be able to avoid this crisis. Earth flew out of the chaotic space zone again and entered the boundless space zone. The Transcendence continent is located in a remote corner in the north. It can be considered as the northern region of the boundless starfield. The force that shook the northern region is eternal thunderclap. The Lord of Thunderclap is suppressing the north. We estimate that we will be able to get close to the Transcendence continent in a week's time. In the Dragon Palace, Wan Xian stood in front of the star chart and listened to Prime Minister Gui's report. In the south of the Transcendence continent, there are 5 to 6 life planets that are relatively close. With the speed of the 5 wisps of divine fire, we can reach them within a month. We can connect to the array formation and teleport instantly. These 5 to 6 life planets are not eternal thunderbolts. Our Dragon Palace can occupy them. Prime Minister Gui looked at the star chart and continued his analysis. Wan Xian nodded his head slightly. Every time the Dragon Palace occupied the ocean of a planet, they would be rewarded by the system. Furthermore, the rewards were extremely generous. Occupying the ocean of a planet was a means for the rapid development of the Dragon Palace. Currently, the number of members of the Dragon Palace is still too small. At the very least, we have to double it. If we can occupy these 5 to 6 planets, let's see if we can recruit more members. Now, leave half of the resources in the Dragon Palace for the promotion of new members in the future. Wan Xian pondered for a moment and said to Prime Minister Gui, "It's the Dragon King. We should indeed increase the number of members of the Dragon Palace." Prime Minister Gui nodded in agreement. There were more than 26,000 subordinates of the Dragon Palace now, but that was not a lot. In fact, it was only a drop in the ocean in this boundless galaxy. They had to increase the number of members of the Dragon Palace to at least 50,000. Although there were more members of the Dragon Palace and more resources needed to increase the number, they could let the disciples of the Dragon Palace go out for training in the future. They could let the disciples of the Dragon Palace enter this vast and boundless galaxy to search for their own opportunities. Time passed slowly while Wan Xian and Prime Minister Gui were discussing the future development of the Dragon Palace. After experiencing the incident with the Divine Leaf Master, Wan Xian and the rest were much more vigilant this time. Dragon King, the extraordinary mainland has appeared in our sight. 7 days passed very quickly. At this time, Earth had already arrived at its designated location, near the planet of the extraordinary mainland. Place Earth in front of the planet of the Transcendence continent, and rotate according to the laws of the universe. Wan Xian immediately instructed Prime Minister Gui. "It's the Dragon King." Prime Minister Gui nodded. "Xiao Xian, do you want to connect the passageway between the Transcendence continent and Earth so that the people of the Transcendence continent can enter Earth and Earth can enter the Transcendence continent?" Feng Luan walked over and asked Wan Xian. "Yes, some of the cultivation grounds of the Divine Kingdom on Earth are great opportunities for the people from the supernatural continent. We can start with the elite members of the Dragon and Phoenix Empire and let them cultivate in the Divine Kingdom on Earth." Wan Xian nodded his head. "Dragon King, it's best if we can open a passageway with other planets, so that we can develop faster." Prime Minister Gui added from the side. "Let's settle down on Earth for the time being. After that, we can investigate the situation of the surrounding planets and make preparations." Wan Xian said and flew out of the Dragon Palace immediately. He looked forward. At this moment, there was an incomparably huge planet in front of them. This planet was dozens of times the size of Earth. Buzz. At this moment, Earth stopped in front of the huge planet and began to rotate slowly. Have we reached our destination? Everyone on Earth looked at the huge planet in front of them with shocked expressions. We should have arrived. Look at the planet in front of us. That is a life planet with an oasis and an ocean. Some experts flew into the sky and said in surprise. At the same time, on the extraordinary continent, some experts also noticed a planet that suddenly appeared in their void space and looked at it in shock. Two distant planets, looking at each other for the first time. Chapter 2050. 2059 Dragon's Divine Throne, Descend. Go. That planet is called the Transcendental Continent. Its area is dozens of times larger than Earth. The Dragon Phoenix Empire rules over the entire continent. That planet is called Earth. It used to be the Dragon King's former residence. Now, the Dragon King has moved it to the sky above our Transcendental Continent. When Earth completely settled beside the Transcendental Continent planet, news spread to Earth and the Transcendental Continent one by one. A demigod-level powerhouse could enter another planet in half a day's time. Wang Xian did not prohibit the connection between Earth and the supernatural continent. On the contrary, the connection between the two planets could promote the development of the two planets. The current rule of the Transcendence was the Dragon Phoenix Empire. In the past few years, it had flourished. The number of demigod-level powerhouses had increased by dozens. Because of the rule of the Dragon Phoenix Empire, all kinds of prodigies emerged. As long as they were geniuses, they would not be hidden. In the following period of time, some people entered Earth, and some people entered the extraordinary continent. After going to another Earth, many people also learned more about the Dragon King. Especially the people on Earth. Now they finally knew why the Dragon King could rise so quickly. They also knew why the Dragon Palace had so many terrifying powerhouses. It turned out that the Dragon King had this planet as his backing. The communication between the two planets was mainly made up of elites. As time passed, it gradually calmed down. Earth was completely stabilized in this piece of starry sky. Half a year passed very quickly. Wang Xian also accompanied a group of girls during this half a year. He had taken down Feng Luan not long ago. She was also handling some matters in the Dragon Phoenix Empire. The main task was to handle the relationship between the supernatural continent and Earth. Furthermore, she had placed some of the divine kingdoms in the supernatural continent in preparation to nurture powerhouses and gods. On Earth, the Dragon Gate Academy was the main force. The two of them had set some rules. Dragon King, Ao Yao and the others want to see you. In the Dragon King Palace, Prime Minister Gui Ao Yao and the other 10 thorn dragon species came to pay their respects. After killing more than 100 immortals from the 5 forces, the Dragon Palace's strength had increased greatly. 8 more thorn dragon species were born after fusing with the darkness divine spark. 5 more berserk dragon species were born. Apart from that, the strength of the members of the Dragon Palace who had ignited the divine fire had also improved. The last time, only half of the resources were consumed. Apart from adding some thorn dragons and berserk dragons, Wang Xian used the rest to raise the strength of the members of the Dragon Palace who were in the godly state. Currently, the strength of the top-notch members of the Dragon Palace had ignited 2 or 3 wisps of divine fire. Compared to the Dragon Palace in the past, their strength had improved tremendously. In addition, the group of small-sized devouring dragons in Ao Crab's body had ignited the divine fire after devouring 70 to 80 divine kingdoms. They were extremely powerful. Now, there were more than 160 people who had ignited the divine fire in the Dragon Palace. Greetings, Dragon King! Ao Yao and the rest bowed and greeted Wang Xian. How is it? Wang Xian asked them. 3 months ago, Wang Xian had sent Ao Yao and the rest to investigate the situation of the other planets in this starfield. Dragon King, among the 6 planets that we have investigated, there are gods in 3 of them. The strongest planet has 2 gods. Ao Yao reported to Wang Xian. A total of 4 gods? Wang Xian nodded his head slightly. Yes, a total of 4 gods. However, we are not sure if there are any gods that have left their planet temporarily, Ao Yao said. Are there any gods that are connected to the outside world on the planets that have gods? Wang Xian asked. Yes, there is one planet where the gods enslave the gods and earn some resources by selling people. The similarity between these 6 planets is that they are lacking in resources and do not support the birth of more gods. Wang Xian nodded slightly when he heard Ao Yao's words. He had also heard some of what Jilin Fei had said. Some life planets were lacking in resources and did not support the birth of gods. Such planets would be abandoned by the gods over time. This was also the reason why these planets were not ruled by eternal thunder. I wonder how those gods communicate with the outside world. Let's ignore everything else and rule these 6 planets first. Wang Xian pondered for a moment. The only problem at the moment was to get in touch with the outside world first and construct a space teleportation formation with the other planets. With the formation, Earth and the Transcendence continent would be able to integrate into the entire boundless galaxy. Get ready. We will descend to the other 6 planets and rule the oceans. Wang Xian said to Prime Minister Gui and the rest. It's the Dragon King. Prime Minister Gui nodded immediately and went outside to get ready. Xiao Xian, are you going out? A group of girls walked over and asked him. Yes. After I rule over the oceans of those 6 planets, you can go to those planets to have some fun. Wang Xian smiled and nodded at them. All right, then we will go to the Transcendence continent with Sister Feng Luan now. The group of girls nodded their heads. Dragon King, the carriage is ready. At this moment, Prime Minister Gui walked in and reported. All right. Wang Xian nodded his head and flew to the sky above the ocean. Roar! At this moment, in the sky above the Dragon Palace, 9 green dragons were pulling a dragon carriage. The majestic canopy that was emitting divine radiance was on top of the dragon carriage. Around the dragon carriage, Ao Jian's 6 dragon guards were on both sides. Ao Nu stood on the dragon carriage with a cattail leaf fan in her hand. At the back, the 10 berserk dragon species were emitting a terrifying aura. Let's go. Wang Xian took a look and flew directly to the dragon carriage of the Dragon Palace. Let's go to the first planet. Wang Xian sat on the dragon carriage and said calmly. Roar! It's the Dragon King. The 9 green dragons roared and the green wind attribute gathered around them. The green light enveloped Wang Xian and the rest. They vanished instantly and teleported towards the vast starry sky. Roar! Roar! In the vast void, 9 gigantic green dragons that were 5,000 meters in size were pulling a divine chariot as they flew through the void. The 9 dragons transformed into green dragons after igniting the divine flames. The speed of the green dragons was the fastest among the group of divine dragons. When they erupted at full speed, their speed was more than 10 times faster than the speed of light. Coupled with the occasional teleportation, their speed was even more terrifying. But even so, it would still take them more than 10 days to reach the nearest life planet. Roar! Roar! More than 10 days passed quickly in the void. Dragon King, the first planet is about to arrive. 13 days later, Ao Jian's voice came from outside. Have we arrived? Wang Xian slowly opened the curtain in front of the divine seat and looked forward. A planet appeared in his line of sight. The planet was about 10 times the size of Earth and the ocean occupied almost 60% of the entire world. The first life planet, Planet Akeley, was named after a god. Chapter 2051 2051 2051 9 Dragon's Throne, Descend. Planet Akeley, a cultivation planet similar to the extraordinary continent. The entire planet was dominated by the god of war, Akeley. The people of the planet were intrepid, and various powers and countries were rampant. Wars often broke out. As the only god on this planet, the god of war stood high above in the palace of the god of war, for the people to worship. In the east of the continent, a vast ocean was surging. At this moment, on both sides of the ocean, the 2 forces were facing each other. Each force had more than 10 million people. At the front, 1 million people were floating in the sky. The atmosphere was extremely solemn. A war was about to break out. The ocean of the sky belongs to our war god empire. All the resources in it belong to our war god empire. Your Skyfire empire can forget about snatching them away from us. In the center of the right side of the team, an old man in armor shouted sternly. Belongs to you? Lord War God said this place belongs to you? If you didn't say it, then don't waste your breath. On the opposite side, a middle-aged man shouted with a cold face. The War God Empire cannot be invaded. If you don't retreat, then prepare to accept the battle. The old man roared. Kill! Behind him, tens of thousands of soldiers roared with killing intent. Fight! On the other side, the middle-aged man was not afraid at all. His face was filled with a sinister expression as he roared with a ferocious face. Fight! Tens of thousands of soldiers also roared. Kill! The war had completely erupted. The killing intent of tens of thousands of people caused the entire sky to change color. What an interesting ant! However, what they didn't know was that in the God of War's shop at the center of the continent, an old man looked in that direction and shook his head indifferently. Roar, roar, roar! Suddenly, in the sky above the entire planet, at the instant the war broke out, an incomparably terrifying roar enveloped the entire planet. Following that, an enormous pressure pressed down on the area below. Hua, hua, hua! At that moment, all the human creatures flying in the sky on the entire planet fell from the sky. Everyone looked up, their faces filled with shock. In the center of the battlefield, tens of thousands of warriors looked up, their faces filled with terror. In the God of War's shop, when the indifferent old man heard the roar, his face changed drastically. Shit! His body moved, and he immediately flew into the sky. Roar! 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 At that moment, the roar continued to ring out, and everyone on the planet trembled again. That's... At that moment, an old man pointed to the sky in shock and stared blankly at the divine carriage pulled by the 9 gigantic creatures. Their eyes widened, and they were filled with disbelief. Buzz! The 9 green dragons dashed forward and quickly arrived in the sky above the ocean. The visitors were naturally Wang Xian and the rest. Looking at the ocean below, Wang Xian stood up slowly and scanned the entire world. I, the Dragon King, have descended here and will establish the Undersea Dragon Palace to control the ocean. Does anyone dare to oppose me? He opened his mouth slowly and his majestic voice spread to the ears of everyone in the world. On the battlefield, tens of thousands of people were stunned when they heard this, and their faces were filled with shock. Who are they? What kind of existence are they? An old man's expression changed drastically as he spoke. Who stepped onto my planet, Akeley? At this moment, the voice of the war god Akeley sounded. The war god is here! They are invaders, the war god is here! On the battlefield, all the warriors were excited when they heard this voice. The god of war, who had not shown his face for over 1,000 years, had appeared. The god of war? Wang Xian heard this voice and looked over. His pair of mysterious eyes scanned the entire planet. In war, the lives of the people are in dire straits. The god of war is not worthy. After scanning the situation of the entire planet, Wang Xian slowly extended his hand. Buzz! A dragon claw was formed instantly and attacked a location of tens of millions of kilometers. What is that? At this moment, the god of war, Akeley, who was flying in the sky, looked in the direction of Wang Xian and the rest. When he saw the 9 terrifying creatures with a strong suppressive force, he was shocked. However, when he saw that the 9 terrifying creatures were pulling a divine throne behind them, he widened his eyes. When he saw Wang Xian making a move, a terrifying expression appeared on his face. Oh no, the opponent's strength is definitely not something I can fight against. FUCK, I was only thinking of spending my old age on this planet. How could such a terrifying existence take a liking to this broken planet? The god of war, Akeley's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly fled into the distance. Buzz! However, at the next moment, that terrifying dragon claw directly grabbed his body. His entire body erupted with terrifying flames, but it was still of no use. The war god Akli's expression changed drastically. "Lord, spare me! Spare me!" he hurriedly shouted out in terror. One! Under the shocked gazes of many people on the continent, the dragon claw grabbed their invincible war god and flew towards the direction of the ocean. This is... At the edge of the sea, the tens of millions of people on the battlefield looked at the god of war who was easily grabbed by a wave of his arm. Their faces were filled with astonishment. "No, no, sir, please spare my life. Please spare my life." At this moment, the god of war, Akli, was begging Wang Xian for mercy with a face full of fear. "Your life is not worthy of being spared. Soul Catcher," Wang Xian said calmly. Soul Catcher was used directly on this god of war. He wanted to kill a god with 2 wisps of divine fire. He could just crush him to death. Buzz. After Soul Catcher was used, the wailing sounds of heaven and earth rang out. A cloud of fire covered the sky. "He's dead! The god of war is actually dead!" Everyone was stunned. They looked at this scene in disbelief. "System, build a dragon palace!" Wang Xian had absorbed his memories. He didn't check immediately and spoke to the system. "Hosts, please prepare sufficient resources to build a dragon palace. The main dragon palace has reached level 6 and can build a level 5 dragon palace. The materials are complete. Are you ready to build it? Build it!" Wang Xian replied immediately. Rumble. Soon, a level 5 dragon palace that was more than 200 kilometers long appeared at the bottom. The moment the dragon palace appeared, all the creatures in the entire ocean were bowing in this direction. Ding! Congratulations to Host for occupying the planet's ocean. Ding! Host has occupied more than 2 of the planet's oceans. You are rewarded with the teleportation formation of the Dragon Palace. At this moment, the system's voice sounded, and Wang Xian was delighted. Let's go in and take a look. Wang Xian moved his body and entered the Dragon Palace below. A level 5 Dragon Palace was almost comparable to the Kingdom of God. On this planet, it was considered the best. All the aquatic creatures on this planet can head to the Dragon Palace. If you pass the Dragon Gate, you can become a disciple of the Dragon Palace, just like my Dragon Palace. Wang Xian entered the Dragon Palace and took a look. Then, he let out a voice that spread across the entire planet and entered everyone's ears. Chapter 2052 2052's Expedition to the Boundless Starfield. The war god is dead and was killed in an instant. That group of people is so terrifying. A peerless expert from outer space, the Dragon King, established a dragon palace? All the Water Tribe members can break through the Dragon Gate? An expert from outer space actually established a force. If only I could join! On Akli Planet, everyone's faces were filled with shock as they listened to this voice. This was especially so for the demonic beasts in the sea of this planet. An existence that could easily kill the god of war was recruiting aquatic creatures. This was simply a huge opportunity for them. If they could join the Dragon Palace, what was there to be afraid of on this planet? Teleportation formation of the Dragon Palace? Wang Xian ignored the shock from the outside world. He came to the front of the east gate of the Dragon Palace and looked at the gigantic teleportation formation. In the center of the formation, the shadows of 9 divine dragons were hidden on the ground, swaying their bodies slowly. When Wang Xian entered, an option immediately appeared in front of his eyes. Teleportation, Earth Dragon Palace. Teleportation, Transcendent Continent Dragon Palace. Oh! Wang Xian's eyes sparkled as he immediately chose Earth Dragon Palace. Buzz. In an instant, he felt as though he had entered a black hole. After a full minute, his figure appeared in front of the east gate of Earth Dragon Palace. Dragon King! When he appeared, he saw Prime Minister Gui standing by the side and calling out to him respectfully. Dragon King, this is? The teleportation formation between our dragon palace? Prime Minister Gui asked in astonishment. Yes. Wang Xian smiled when he saw that he had returned to the dragon palace on Earth. With the teleportation formation of the dragon palace, it would be much easier to handle some matters in the future. Furthermore, if there was a problem in the dragon palace, they would be able to react instantly. Prime Minister Gui, the ocean of a planet has been controlled. Send some people over to take care of it, and recruit some members. Wang Xian said to Prime Minister Gui. It's the Dragon King. I will bring some people over to prepare now. Prime Minister Gui nodded his head immediately. I'll go over first. Wang Xian stepped into the teleportation formation and returned to the Ackley Dragon Palace. At the same time, he had a thought. In the Dragon Palace, a clone flew into the teleportation formation and went straight to Ackley's Dragon Palace. Now, Wang Xian had 7 clones, and each of them was equivalent to one of himself. He could totally let his clone stay here. Let's take a look at the memories of the God of War. Wang Xian sat on the dragon chair and immediately checked all the memories of the God of War. The God of War, Ackley, had lived for tens of thousands of years. He should know a lot about the boundless galaxy. The free planet? In the God of War's memories, Wang Xian found some useful information. The most important one was the free planet. The free planet was also known as the merchant planet. This planet was very special. It focused on trade and prohibited any fighting and killing. On the free planet, spirit stones could be used to teleport to many life planets and some powerful domains in the boundless star field. Earth could also set up a formation leading to the free planet. With the free planet as a transit point, one could travel to at least 100 life planets and powerful domains. It seems like I have to set up a space teleportation formation leading to the free planet on Earth. Wang Xian thought to himself. Once it was built, the Dragon Palace would be able to proceed with its development. Buzz! 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 At this moment, in the teleportation formation of the Dragon Palace, Prime Minister Gui and the other members appeared slowly. Prime Minister Gui, I'll leave this to you guys. I'll go and occupy the other planets. As Wang Xian spoke, he immediately flew to the divine chariot. The 9 green dragons roared and flew into the void. Next, they occupied the ocean of the other 5 planets. A month later, Wang Xian stood in the undersea dragon palace called Mingyang Planet with a smile on his face. In front of him, there were 2 middle-aged men kneeling. One was fat, and the other was thin. They were very tall and very short. These 2 people were the gods on Mingyang Planet. They were also the only planet with 2 gods. This was the best planet among the 6 planets. Although it did not have many resources, the scenery was very beautiful. Furthermore, under the restriction of these 2 gods, the entire planet was thriving. In the future, as long as the Dragon King says the word, we will definitely go all out. Wang Xian did not kill these 2 gods. At this moment, some of them were kneeling in front of them in fear as they pledged their loyalty. They never expected that such a terrifying existence would descend on their planet. One had to know that their planet was considered one of the last existences in the entire boundless galaxy. They had no resources, no treasures, and no treasures. Only the 2 of them who were indifferent would be reluctant to part with their hometown and live here. Get up! I'll leave you 2 with something. When Prime Minister Gui and the rest walked out of the formation, Wang Xian said to them, Please give us your instructions, Dragon King! After witnessing the strength of Wang Xian and the rest, the 2 gods who had a wisp of divine fire did not dare to resist at all. Go to the free planet and set up a planet teleportation formation, Wang Xian instructed them. Dragon King, the cost of a planet teleportation formation is very huge. I have enough spirit stones here. Just do as I say. Wang Xian interrupted them and said directly. Yes, yes. The 2 of them nodded immediately. Follow me first. Wang Xian brought them to the Dragon Palace on Earth. Then, he asked them to lead 2 members of the Dragon Palace to set up the formation. After the formation is set up, we will have to consider the future development. Wang Xian returned to the Dragon King's palace and sat on the dragon throne, deep in thought. Currently, the Dragon Palace occupied the ocean of 6 planets. However, those 6 planets were basically abandoned by the gods in the boundless starfield. They could not be compared to those planets with huge resources. As long as it was 2 wisps of divine fire or above, the gods would not be interested in these few planets. Without resources, it meant that it was difficult for the members of the Dragon Palace to improve quickly. The only way was to enter a more powerful planet or domain through the free planets. Only then would the Dragon Palace be able to develop rapidly. Otherwise, even if it was 100 years, the members of the Dragon Palace would only be able to improve by 1 level. However, although those 6 planets don't have much resources, the system rewards for ruling the ocean of a planet are very generous. Wang Xian looked at the system reward and revealed a smile. The arrow dragon species was a dragon species with terrifying long-range attacks. It was a dragon species at the peak of the Dragon Palace. The Gale dragon species was a small-scale dragon species. It was an intermediate-level dragon species of the Dragon Palace. The mother nest was a world. The entire mother nest was like a small universe. The space within it was enough to contain 10 Earths. Treasure-seeking ants were godly beasts that could find treasures. The dragon blood sword was an invincible godly sword. The power of the godly sword depended on the user's power. Chapter 2053 2053 Conquering the Boundless Star Area. The arrow dragon was known as the dragon with the strongest long-range attack in the Divine Dragon Palace. The arrow dragon had the wind and metal attributes, which was a huge improvement for the Heavenly Eye Arrow division. The Gale dragon wasn't very useful to the Dragon Palace. It was basically useless. The mother nest and the treasure-seeking ant were treasures of the insect clan. The mother nest could store a large number of items, and the treasure-seeking ant was an extremely important and rare existence among the insect clan. Every large-scale Zerg race would have a treasure-seeking ant. The treasure-seeking ant could lead the race to find resources and treasures. The powerful treasure-seeking ant could even detect the existence of treasures within a few hundred light years. The treasure-seeking ant could be said to be a rare and special divine beast. Wang Xian sized up the treasure-seeking ant in his hand. It was only the size of a palm and had 6 antennae. The 6 antennae were pointed up, down, left, right, front, and back. The treasure-seeking ant did not have the slightest offensive power, but it possessed an extremely terrifying speed. The treasure-seeking ant can accurately detect the level of the treasure. Now that this treasure-seeking ant can explore an area of 100,000 kilometers, it's a rare divine beast. Wang Xian muttered to himself. He took out the mother nest that was the size of a palm and kept it in the mother nest. Clang! He took out the blood-red longsword in front of him. The hilt of the sword was in the form of a dragon head. The scabbard was made of dragon scales. As he took out the dragon blood sword, the 9 divine dragon phantoms on the hilt of the sword wound around the sword slowly. The entire dragon blood sword was made of dragon scales as the scabbard, dragon bones as the body of the sword, and dragon blood as the soul. Furthermore, it was made of the divine dragon's 9 transformations: divine dragon scales, dragon bones, and dragon blood. Only those with pure divine dragon bloodline could use it. The stronger the bloodline, the stronger the ability to unleash it. This is my first divine dragon weapon. However, this dragon blood sword is much more powerful than my current 5 elements grinding technique. Wang Xian fondled it with fondness. Although he was not good at using a sword, such a cool sword was still something he loved. The oceans of the 6 planets were easily occupied. 6 clones were stationed there. Wang Xian had nothing to do for the time being. Now, all he had to do was wait quietly for the news. 3 months passed quickly while he accompanied a group of girls every day. Unknowingly, it had been a year since Earth came to the boundless galaxy. Dragon King, Minghua, and the 2 members of the Dragon Palace have returned. On this day, Prime Minister Gui came to the Dragon Palace and reported to Wang Xian. Are they back? Wang Xian was slightly stunned. A look of surprise and joy appeared on his face. He immediately went to the Dragon King's hall. "Greetings, Dragon King!" Minghuiyang Fire was the two fire gods on Mingyang planet. 3 months ago, he went to the free planet with 2 disciples of the Dragon Palace to set up a formation. "Have you brought the formation compass?" Wang Xian looked at them and asked immediately. "Dragon King, we have not let you down. We have brought the formation compass with us. The formation has been set up on the free planet. As long as we set up the compass, we will be able to teleport immediately." Minghua immediately took out a 100-meter-long compass and said to Wang Xian, "All right, let's go out." Wang Xian's body moved and he immediately flew out. He had already chosen the place where the formation was set up. Wang Xian asked Prime Minister Gui to inform Xiao Ran and the rest. The formation compass was set up at the seaside. When the time came, there would be members of the Dragon Palace guarding the place. Everyone could enter the free planet through the formation as long as they had sufficient spirit stones. Such a long-distance planet teleportation cost a terrifying amount of spirit stones. Whoosh! 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 Soon, a group of girls, Xiao Ran, Ji Lingfei, Chen Feiyang, and a group of members of the Dragon Palace rushed over. "The array formation leading to the nearest free planet is connected?" Chen Feiyang looked over with excitement in his eyes. "It's connected. Through the array formation, you can enter the free planet. Each free planet has hundreds of arrays leading to other planets. As long as you enter the free planet, you can basically enter most places in the boundless star field." Minghua, Yanghua, and the rest looked at the many gods in the Dragon Palace and felt the majestic power. They were filled with fear and immediately replied. Buzz. The formation was set up in front and emitted a mysterious power. "Dragon King, should we start implementing the plan?" Prime Minister Gui looked at Wang Xian and asked slowly. "Let's start. We've been waiting for a year," Wang Xian said slowly as he looked at Aohe and the rest. "Then, Dragon King, I will go to the boundless sea. When the time comes, I will definitely conquer the boundless sea." Aohe smiled confidently as a strong sense of confidence emanated from his body. Currently, Aohe had 50 to 60 divine-level devouring dragons in his body. He alone could match a top-notch strength. "Dragon King, there won't be any problems with our strange demon combat division." The black and white light on Ao Yao's body flickered. He was also full of confidence. "Dragon King, our dragon guards are only suitable for training alone. There might be death, but if we can survive it, we will definitely be invincible," Ao Jian said coldly with an expressionless face. His entire person was like a sword. He was incomparably cold. If he could master the heartless sword principle, Ao Jian was confident that he could fight, or even kill wild dragons and starwood dragons of the same level. "All right, I believe in all of you." Wang Xian glanced at them and revealed a faint smile. A year ago, the Dragon Palace had already made preparations. The first task was to increase their own strength. With the resources that the Dragon Palace currently controlled, the only way to increase their strength quickly was through experience. Aohe led his subordinates into the largest ocean in the boundless galaxy, the Boundless Sea. Ao Yao and the rest were rebuilding the Dragon Assassin organization. As for the Dragon Guards, they were training their ruthless ways alone. The 3 great combat divisions of the Dragon Palace were all mobilized. There was a high possibility of heavy casualties if they were to go out this time. However, if they wanted to be strong, they had to pay a price. Furthermore, with the ancestral tree's soul returning wood, the casualties could be reduced to the minimum. "Dragon King, wait for our good news." Aohe and the rest walked straight to the middle-aged man in the formation and spoke to Wang Xian. He nodded his head faintly. His eyes were sparkling as he watched the few thousand subordinates of the Dragon Palace step into the formation. Buzz. The formation flickered and the group of members immediately disappeared. "Dragon King, about that. I'm going back to my family. If you have any orders in the future, just let me know. I'll definitely bring my family's disciples over." At this moment, Qin Feiyang, who was at the side, said to Wang Xian. He had already recovered to the godly state. Now that the formation was activated, he naturally wanted to go home and show off. Okay. Wang Xian nodded at him. Mengxin. Qin Fiyang looked at Lu Mingxin, who was at the side. Lu Mingxin looked hesitant as she looked at her brother. Xiao Ran smiled at him and nodded. After a while, I will look for you guys. Yes, brother. We'll be back soon, Lu Mingxin said with a slightly red face. Don't worry, brother-in-law. I'll become the eternal God Lord soon. At that time, I'll take care of you guys, Qin Fiyang said shamelessly and brought Lu Mingxin into the formation. One by one, the figures left and entered the endless star area to fight. Chapter 2054. 2054. Xiao Xian, are you going out as well? As they watched the two combat divisions of the Dragon Palace and Aohe leave, the group of girls looked at Wang Xian. We have to go out for a walk after all. Our place is still too small. Wang Xian's gaze swept across the group of girls. Even though they controlled 6 planets, it was still too small for the Dragon Palace. The resources were too scarce. If they wanted to improve quickly, they had to step onto the stage at the center of the boundless galaxy. Besides, those 2 girls have been urging me for a long time. I haven't gone to look for them. If I don't go now, the 2 girls will probably rush over. Wang Xian continued with a smile on his face. Are you going to the Eternal Divine Leaves first? The group of girls asked him. I'm going to the Eternal Divine Leaves first to understand the information of the boundless star field. The information of a god is very beneficial to the Dragon Palace, Wang Xian said to them. All right then. You can leave in peace. We will guard the house. The group of girls nodded and said, All right, there's no rush. I'll accompany you for a few more days. Wang Xian smiled and said, There are still some things that need to be dealt with. The departure of the Dragon Guards and the strange Demon War Department was just the beginning. The Firehammer clan was also going to enter the Free Planet to build a forging shop that belonged to the Dragon Palace. In the later stages, the Demon War Department might also look for some resources on the nearby planets. In the next few days, Wang Xian accompanied the group of girls and discussed some matters with Prime Minister Gui. 5 days later, Wang Xian brought Minghua and Yanghua to the front of the formation and stepped into it. Buzz. The scene changed and the bustling sounds reached Wang Xian's ears. After he regained his sight, Wang Xian immediately looked at his surroundings. At least tens of millions of people were gathered in the surroundings. This place was like a huge altar. One by one, the runes of the formation stood at the bottom. Many people appeared in the formation. In the middle of the formation, there was a stone tablet that was 10,000 meters tall. There were a few words carved on the 4 sides of the stone tablet. War was prohibited on the Free Planet. Those who violated the rules would be killed. The words were filled with a cold aura. Looking at the entire formation, 90% of the people had the strength of a demigod or above. Even Wang Xian could see 20 to 30 gods who had ignited the divine fire. Among them, there were not only humans. There were also some creatures that had transformed into demonic beasts and possessed the characteristics of demonic beasts. There were also quite a number of giants that were more than 10 meters tall around them. There were all kinds of them. Everyone seemed to be used to them, and were not too surprised. Dragon King, this is the array formation of the Free Planet. By placing supreme-grade spirit stones, one can enter any planet that is connected to any array formation. Now that the array formation is activated, others can also be teleported to Earth. However, under normal circumstances, no one will be teleported to an unfamiliar planet. They are afraid of encountering danger. Minghua, Yanghua and the rest explained to Wang Xian from the side. In addition, the Free Planet is a trading planet. Any fights are prohibited. Once it is discovered, there will be experts suppressing it. Every free planet is jointly maintained by the Boundless Starfield Trading Company and a god. Even the gods of the 9 wisps of divine fire would not dare to cause trouble here. A few thousand kilometers ahead is the trading market. In this market, even extremely precious divine artifacts can be bought. The gods of the hundreds of planets are basically trading here. The two of them continued to add. Wang Xian nodded his head faintly. Let's go and take a look. As he spoke, he flew towards the trading market. The entire free planet was 4 to 5 times the size of Earth. Although it was not considered to be very big among the other planets, it was still very huge for a trading market. Wang Xian, who was holding the dragon blood sword in his hand, was dressed in a brocade robe. He looked extraordinary. Even among the powerhouses from the other planets, he was one of a kind. It was not the first time Minghua and Yanghua came to this planet. They led Wang Xian as they walked ahead. Dragon King, this is the center of the market. There are more than a dozen top-tier trading firms nearby. These trading firms are very powerful. They are trading across at least a dozen planets and have all kinds of unique treasures. Over there is Eternal Thunderbolt Trading Firm. Eternal Thunderbolt Trading Firm is the largest trading firm in the northern region. After all, Eternal Thunderbolt controls more than 70 life planets. The two of them introduced to Wang Xian as they walked. How many gods are there in Eternal Thunderclap? Wang Xian scanned his surroundings and looked at the buildings that were 10,000 meters tall. He was slightly surprised. How many exactly? The two of them were slightly stunned and shook their heads. We are not sure either. However, there should be more than 1,000 of them. The two of them guessed. So many? Wang Xian was a little surprised. Dragon King, they are in control of 70 to 80 life planets in the northern region. These life planets are all rich in resources. It is easy for a planet to produce dozens of gods. In addition, there are some powerful space domains. We have guessed that there are less than 1,000 gods. It is even possible to produce 2,000 to 3,000 of them. The two whispered. The entire boundless star field was incomparably huge. Eternal shocking thunder, which occupied nearly 1/6 to 1/7 of the resources, was naturally extremely terrifying. No one dares to challenge the God Lord's majesty. In the end, the two added in a soft voice. Courting death. You actually dare to steal our Eternal Shocking Thunder Trading Company's treasures. You're courting death. However, just as the two finished speaking, a vast voice resounded throughout the entire planet. Minghua and Yanghua were slightly stunned as they looked at the sky in astonishment. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, terrifying figures flew out one after another. Haha, I don't care if you are Eternal Thunderclap or whatever. There's nothing I like that I can't steal. An extremely arrogant voice rang out, causing everyone on the free planet to be slightly stunned. Their faces revealed a look of shock. This is... Wang Xian was also stunned at this moment. It wasn't that he was surprised that someone dared to steal from the Eternal Thunderclap Trading Company. Instead, he sensed an extremely familiar aura. The Son of Heaven! His heart stirred as his eyes flickered. Another angle of view appeared in front of him. A short figure was staring at the void as he flew at a terrifying speed. In the sky above, meteors fell from the sky one after another. His figure sank into the meteors one by one and quickly shuttled through them. Go to hell! A furious roar sounded from behind him. Numerous attacks that were comparable to peak deity realm attacks attacked him. However, under the cover of those meteors, he did not suffer the slightest injury. Someone actually dared to steal something on the free planet. Furthermore, it was the treasure of the Eternal Thunderclap Trading Company. Who is so audacious? Stealing here hasn't happened in hundreds of thousands of years. Sounds of disbelief rang out from the surroundings. Wang Xian regained his senses and pursed his lips. His eyes were sparkling. The son of the true dragon, the son of the earth. Chapter 2055. 2055 Cosmic Energy Tide. Wang Xian didn't expect that the Earth-Sun Warrior would actually come to the boundless galaxy. Furthermore, he was audacious enough to steal the treasures of Eternal Shocking Thunder Trading Company. Just like the exclamations of the people around him, he was audacious enough. In the northern region, no one dared to offend Eternal Shocking Thunder, let alone steal the treasures of eternal shocking thunder. Back when I ignited the divine fire on the Transcendence continent, the Earth's Sun Warrior and the demonic dragon Son of Heaven entered the vast void. I didn't expect to meet the Earth's Sun Warrior here. He has already ignited 7 wisps of divine fire. Furthermore, he is able to escape under the peak of the godly state. This fellow is quite strong. Wang Xian's eyes sparkled. At this moment, with a thought, he could wipe out the Earth's Sun Warrior's soul and take over this body. However, he did not do so. He watched quietly as the local Sun Warrior disappeared into the void. Behind him, a group of experts at the peak of the godly state chased after him. With a thought, an ant appeared in his palm. It was the treasure-seeking ant. Buzz. The moment the treasure-seeking ant appeared, his 6 tentacles emitted a white glow. Squeak, 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 squeak. A faint sound came out from his mouth. Wang Xian immediately sensed information one after another. Not only did that country bumpkin steal 1 item, he also stole dozens of them. Furthermore, all of them were at the divine level. The highest level was 8 wisps of divine fire. This fellow! The treasure-seeking ant clearly transmitted information of all the treasures within tens of thousands of kilometers to his mind. This made him extremely surprised. What surprised him even more was that this country bumpkin had stolen so many treasures and was so precious. No wonder the gods of Eternal Thunderclap were so furious. He escaped. Looks like Eternal Thunderclap is just SOS so. Wang Xian smiled faintly. Minghua Yanghua, who was at the side, opened his mouth slightly. His face was filled with disbelief. Someone had stolen the treasure from the Eternal Thunderclap Trading Company. This? You dare to say that our Eternal Thunderclap is only SOS so? At this moment, an extremely cold voice was heard. Wang Xian and Minghua Yanghua were slightly stunned. They looked to the side. You dare to insult our Eternal Thunderclap? I think you are courting death. On the right, 5 young men stared at Wang Xian and the rest. Their eyes revealed a cold expression. No, no, no. How would we dare to insult Eternal Lightning? It's too late for us to suck up to them. Minghua Yanghua was slightly shocked when he saw the clothes on their bodies. He quickly said. At the same time, traces of the gods' pressure overflowed from their bodies. HMPH, don't think that you can insult Eternal Lightning just because you have ignited the gods' fire. Do you believe that you won't be able to walk out of here today? The young man in the middle felt their divine might and shouted with a gloomy face without any fear. How can that be? How dare our little god insult the Eternal Thunderclap? Fighting is prohibited on the free planet. Hee, young masters, we'll be leaving first. Minghua frowned slightly. He quickly pulled Wang Xian by the shoulder and walked towards the location of the teleportation formation. You don't know what's good for you. The 5 young men saw them leaving and raised their eyebrows slightly. They didn't bother about it anymore and snorted coldly. HMPH, that damn guy dared to steal our Eternal Thunderbolt's treasure. I wonder if he was killed by Lord Lei Wen. With the majesty of our Eternal Thunderbolt, Lord Lei Wen will definitely be able to capture him. The few young men were conversing. Dragon King, you must not criticize them in the territory of Eternal Thunderclap. When Minghua and Yanghua saw that the 5 young men behind them did not chase after them, they heaved a sigh of relief and reminded Wang Xian. So powerful? Wang Xian raised his eyebrows faintly. We, as a small force, naturally cannot be enemies with Eternal Thunderclap, especially in their territory. Even if they are just a few demigod-level disciples, we should not offend them, Minghua said solemnly. Hee. Wang Xian chuckled and didn't say anything. A powerful force indeed possessed such prestige. Dragon King, where are you planning to go next? The 3 of them returned to the formation and Minghua asked him. To the Eternal Divine Leaf. Do you know the teleportation route? Wang Xian looked at them. Eternal Leaf of the East? The 2 of them were slightly stunned and looked at Wang Xian in astonishment. Yes, why? Wang Xian looked at them in puzzlement. Dragon King, among the 5 major forces, the eternal leaf and eternal thunderclap have always had a bad relationship. They are basically enemies and have not reached the teleportation formation in the eastern region directly. If we want to go there, we have to go through several planets for the transit. The two of them explained to Wang Xian. Is it an enemy force? Wang Xian was slightly surprised. So be it. Let's go! It's the Dragon King! The two of them nodded and immediately determined the route through the teleportation formation. Buzz! The formation trembled. Soon, everything in front of them changed. This area of the formation was obviously hundreds of times smaller than the free planet. The area covered by the formation was only 10 kilometers. Dragon King, over here! They came to the side and continued to use the array formation to make the transmissions. After 4 consecutive transmissions to the 4 planets, the consumption of spirit stones was extremely huge. Even Wang Xian frowned slightly. When the time comes, I'll let the 2 rich ladies help me out, he thought to himself, and revealed a smile on his face. The transmission array leading to the thunderous sound continent has been shut down. However, just as they were about to make their final teleportation, a voice suddenly came from the side. What's going on? Why has the teleportation array suddenly been shut down? Minghua and Yang Hu were slightly stunned, and they immediately asked the management staff next to the array. My lords, the energy tide at the boundary between the eastern and northern regions has once again erupted. Right now, Eternal Thunderclap and Eternal Divine Leaf are currently at war there. The array was shut down by Eternal Thunderclap experts, and we can't open it now. I heard that this energy tide is the largest in the past 100,000 years. There are over 1,000 gods gathered there. It is best that the 2 lords do not get involved in this mess. The Thunderclap Continent's manager sensed the might of the blazing sun flame and respectfully reminded them. Energy tide, is there a large-scale battle? The 2 of them frowned slightly. Their faces were filled with solemnity. What is the energy tide? Wang Xian asked in surprise. Dragon King, the universal energy tide is also a great fortune for the gods. Since ancient times, the universe created all living things. All living things are created by energy. The energy tide is the purest form of energy. If one can undergo a baptism in the energy tide, it can improve one's physique and increase one's strength. Besides, in the universe tide, there are universe true treasures and godly weapons. The friction and battle between Eternal Thunder and Eternal Godly Leaf started there. Chapter 2056. 2056. Listen to my orders. The so-called cosmic energy tide was a special Earth created for a special reason. There were black holes in the universe. The sizes of black holes varied. Some were the size of a palm, while others were hundreds of kilometers or thousands of kilometers in size. Some black holes moved all the time, while others remained stationary. The energy tide came from the black hole. A large amount of spiritual energy formed a tide because of the black hole. This energy tide carried various items and formed a tidal zone in the void. Because the tide was formed by the gathering of various kinds of spiritual energy, if someone entered the tide or cultivated at the edge of the tide, it would be dozens or even hundreds of times more than the outside world. The cosmic energy tide was not common, but there was one in the endless star field. It was also because of this energy tide that the dividing line between the eastern region and the northern region appeared. The boundary of this energy tide was about 10 million kilometers long. When the tide hadn't fully erupted, cultivating in this place was about 10 times more than cultivating in the outside world. If one could enter the center, it would be about 20 times more than cultivating in the outside world. And when the tide erupted, if one cultivated in the center, it would be more than 100 times more than cultivating in the center. In addition, in the energy tide, there would sometimes be weapons that were naturally formed by the impact of the energy washing. There were even divine weapons. Of course, there were all kinds of dangers accompanying the explosion in the tide. There were all kinds of meteorites, metal materials, and even some energy demon beasts mixed in the tide. If one accidentally bumped into these things, even a godly state expert might die. However, this could not stop countless people from going there to cultivate. Even the eternal divine leaf and eternal shocking thunder, the two major forces, had a fight over this, wanting to occupy this place. Dragon King, this formation has been shut down. Let's go back, Minghua and Yanghua said to Wang Xian timidly. As two of the more timid gods of divine fire, they wanted to retreat after hearing the words of the manager of the teleportation formation on the Thunderclap continent. Although their Dragon King's strength and faction were very strong, there were at most 100 godly state experts. There were more than 1,000 gods at the energy tide. Moreover, that was the battlefield of eternal thunderclap and eternal divine leaves. Although they were not cannon fodder, there was a high chance that they would die. If we fly from this planet, how long will it take to enter the eternal divine leaves? Wang Xian raised his eyebrows and asked the manager of the formation. Young master, if you want to fly over, I'm afraid it will take a month at the speed of a wisp of divine fire god. The array manager replied with slight astonishment. Do you have a detailed map of the starry sky in this area? Wang Xian asked him. Yes, we do. The array manager nodded. Dragon King, we don't want it. The energy tide of the universe. Such a precious place, of course we have to go and take a look. Moreover, I still have to go to the eternal divine leaf. Wang Xian looked at the two of them who were timid and said faintly. This, that. All right then. The two of them did not dare to resist and could only nod their heads in resignation. Let's go and take a look at the cosmic energy tide. Wang Xian took the starry sky chart and flew towards the void with great interest. It's the Dragon King! The two of them nodded and followed behind. After entering the void, Wang Xian took a look at the direction of the starry sky chart and teleported away with the fiery yang flame. Although Wang Xian's main purpose for coming out this time was to visit the two girls, he still needed to have a more detailed understanding of the entire boundless star field. Naturally, he had to take a look at this famous energy tidal land in the universe. If it was a treasure land, it could definitely allow a combat division of the Dragon Palace to come over and increase their strength in the future. Wang Xian's speed was comparable to a god with 8 wisps of divine fire. However, his endurance was definitely comparable to a god lord. The continuous movements did not consume much of his energy. We're almost there. In just 2 days, Wang Xian muttered as he looked at the markings on the starry sky map. Have the two of you been here before? Wang Xian asked Minghua and Yanghua. Dragon King, we have never been here before. This is a dangerous place. If we didn't have the eternal thunderclap or the eternal divine leaf, it would be very dangerous here. The two of them shook their heads. They had read a lot of books, so they knew a little about this place. However, this was his first time coming here. Crash! At this moment, a series of special sounds could be heard faintly from the front. Wang Xian's dragon eyes of yin-yang and the 5 elements were glowing. He immediately looked towards the front. Hiss! When his gaze swept over, he revealed an extremely surprised expression. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. An energy tide with a width of at least a few 100 kilometers appeared in their line of sight. As for its length, Wang Xian couldn't see the end of it at a glance. The energy tide was located in the void. It was like a chaotic ocean with a thickness of a few 100 kilometers. Amidst the endless energy, there were all kinds of meteorites and other items. They were like trash and carried a terrifying impact force. With my yin-yang dragon eyes, I can only see a few dozen kilometers inside. This energy tide is too terrifying. Just the impact of this energy alone. If there is no god with the strength to enter the center, he would be instantly assimilated by the energy. Wang Xian's eyes revealed a look of shock. Huff! 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 At this moment, the roar of flames could be heard from further ahead. His gaze swept over, and he was even more astonished. The energy tide wasn't just a spiritual energy tide. Sometimes, it would be a fire tide, a lust tide, a lightning tide, and all sorts of things. What a terrifying energy tide! This is more than 10 times more terrifying than what was recorded in the books. It is indeed the strongest energy tide in the past 100,000 years. Beside him, Minghua and Yanghua looked over in astonishment. This is the lower reaches of the energy tide. Let's go to the upper reaches and take a look. Wang Xian's eyes sparkled as he looked at the energy tide. Following the huge energy tide, he flew towards the upper reaches. The closer he got, the more astonished he was. Such a miraculous scene could only be seen in the boundless galaxy. Dragon King, there's someone up ahead. It seems like they are fighting. After flying for 4 hours, Minghua suddenly shouted at Wang Xian. I see them. Wang Xian's eyes were shining as he stared ahead. There, 5,000 to 6,000 people were fighting. Each of them was not weaker than a demigod. There were even 6 to 7 godly state experts among them. They should be the people from Eternal Divine Leaf and Eternal Thunderclap. Dragon King, it's best that we don't get involved. The two immediately added. He nodded lightly and was not prepared to get involved. But sometimes, things often backfired. Chapter 2057. 2057. Listen to this young master's orders. Restrain those damned eternal divine leaves! In front of the vast energy tide, 4,000 to 5,000 people were engaged in a fierce battle. In the north of the energy tide, dozens of figures were floating in the sky. They held a long whip in their hands, and the whip extended into the energy tide. They held it with both hands, as if they were fighting for something. On the opposite side, there were also dozens of people fighting against it. Above the energy tide was a battlefield of thousands of people. From time to time, someone would fall into the energy tide and let out a miserable cry. In an instant, they were assimilated by the terrifying energy tide and disappeared. Damn it, these guys actually hid their strength. Young Master Yun, we are not their match. Let go of this treasure. In the sky above the energy tide, a God Realm expert shouted at the young man holding a long whip behind him. Haha, a bunch of trash from Eternal Shocking Thunder actually want to snatch our treasure. They're courting death. As soon as his voice fell, a young man on the opposite side shouted with a face full of ridicule. Bastard, this group of trash! The young man holding the long whip, dressed in purple clothing, and had the word Shocking Thunder written on his chest revealed an embarrassed expression. This is a divine weapon, a precious divine weapon! He growled in a low voice with a face full of unwillingness. Young Master Yun, someone is flying over from our left! At this moment, a middle-aged man standing beside young Master Yun said in a low voice. Oh? Someone from our side? Young Master Yun looked over and saw 3 figures flying over. They should be flying over from our northern region. They might be here to get some benefits. The 3 of them dared to fly over. They should be at the god level. The middle-aged man analyzed the young man. The god level? Young Master Yun's eyes sparkled as he looked to the left. The 3 of you, come over and assist this young master. Listen to my orders and I'll bring you upstream. Thunderbolt order! Young Master Yun shouted loudly. With a wave of his arm, a token on his waist flew up into the sky. The purple token enlarged and the word Thunderbolt could be seen clearly within a few thousand kilometers. The people on the other side are from the northern region. Let's end this as soon as possible. On the other side, a group of young men and women saw 3 figures flying over from the other side. When they heard young Master Yun's voice, their expressions changed slightly as they shouted loudly. Eh? At this moment, the 3 people flying over were Wang Xian and the other 2. When they heard the voices coming from the front, they were slightly stunned. The Thunderbolt token. That is a direct disciple of Eternal Thunderbolt. Only direct disciples have the Thunderbolt token. When Minghua and Yanghua saw the huge token in the void, they were slightly shocked. What's the use of the Thunderbolt token? Wang Xian raised his eyebrows and looked forward. Dragon King, one of the Thunderbolt tokens represents the status of a direct disciple of Eternal Thunderbolt. The other one holds the Thunderbolt token and can mobilize the subordinate forces of Eternal Thunderbolt. When the subordinate forces encounter the Thunderbolt token, they have no choice but to obey. The 2 of them said immediately. Oh, it has nothing to do with us. Wang Xian swept his gaze over indifferently. There was not the slightest fluctuation on his face. Minghua and Yang Hua's eyes flickered. They followed behind Wang Xian without saying a word. Go around! As Wang Xian spoke, he prepared to go around this area. Young Master Yun, that group of people ignored us. When Eternal Thunderclap and the rest saw Wang Xian and the rest flying to the side, their expressions changed slightly. Damn it, they actually dared to ignore us! Young Master Yun's expression changed slightly. At this moment, above the energy tide, a godly state expert spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated hurriedly. Oh no, young Master Yun, let's give up! Everyone looked over and said immediately. Trash! Young Master Yun gritted his teeth. There was an intense look of unwillingness on his face. He waved his arm and withdrew the whip in his hand. Ha ha ha, the direct descendant disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder is just a trash! On the opposite side, everyone laughed out loud. A carefree expression appeared on their faces as they mocked. Ka ka ka! Young Master Yun clenched his arm tightly. His expression was somewhat malevolent as he stared at the opposite side with eyes emitting flames. Young Master Yun! The battle above the energy tide had ended. 2,000 to 3,000 people flew behind young Master Yun. Their expressions were a little awkward. Stop those 3 people. I want to see what faction they are from in the northern region. How dare they disobey my orders? Young Master Yun heard the mockery from the other party. He looked at Wang Xian and the rest with a stern expression. Young Master Yun, those 3 people should be gods. Their strength is probably... A god with 2 wisps of divine fire looked over and said with slight hesitation. If I ask you to go, then go. What? Are you afraid that they will make a move? Young Master Yun shouted coldly. The people from the northern region naturally do not dare to make a move. We will go immediately. When the 3 gods saw young Master Yun's expression, they did not dare to disobey. Young Master Yun was currently in a fit of anger. It was the 3 of them who were unlucky. In the entire northern region, no one would dare to provoke Eternal Thunderclap. 2,000 to 3,000 people immediately flew towards Wang Xian and the rest. Young Master Yun followed behind them with a cold expression. Eh? What is that trash Yun trying to do? Just now, he ordered the 3 people in the void to come over and help. The other party didn't bother with him. He might be trying to cause trouble for the other party. Interesting. They are all from the northern region. It's not a bad idea to let them fight each other. On the opposite side, Eternal Divine Leaf and the rest looked over with smiles on their faces. Not good, Dragon King. They are flying towards us. At this moment, Minghua and Yang Hua's expressions changed slightly when they saw young Master Yun and the rest flying towards them. Wang Xian naturally saw them as well. He gestured to them and stopped in the air. Which faction are you from in the northern region? Which planet are you from? A group of people flew over from the front. A god stared at Wang Xian and the rest and asked aggressively. What's the matter? Wang Xian glanced at them and asked faintly. Didn't you hear my order just now? Yunxiao walked slowly to the front and stared at Wang Xian with a sinister gaze. He raised his head slightly and questioned. We are not your subordinates. Why should we listen to your orders? Wang Xian felt amused and replied to him. Do you know that in the northern region, no one dares to disobey our Eternal Thunderclap's orders? Yunxiao narrowed his eyes slightly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. So what if we disobey? Wang Xian saw the killing intent in his eyes and narrowed his eyes as well. His gaze swept across the 2,000 to 3,000 people behind him. As soon as he finished his sentence, the 3 gods behind Yunxiao took a step forward with an embarrassed expression. A terrifying aura charged straight at him. What do you think about the northern region? Young Master Yun stared at Wang Xian with a sinister gaze. Die. All right, I'll grant your wish. Chapter 2058. 2058 killed him casually. Die. All right, I'll grant your wish. A calm voice came out from Wang Xian's mouth. He stared at young Master Yun with a calm gaze. At the same time, he moved his thumb slightly. Clang! The dragon blood sword in his hand emitted a metallic sound. A terrifying aura emanated from the sword. He wants to make a move! Kill him! At this moment, when the three gods beside young Master Yun saw Wang Xian's move, they were shocked. Their expressions changed drastically. The young man in front of them actually dared to make a move against them, and the direct disciples of Eternal Shocking Thunder. Was he challenging the prestige of Eternal Shocking Thunder? Did he not want to live anymore? Damn you guys, you are courting death! When young Master Yun saw that Wang Xian dared to draw his sword, his expression changed slightly. However, he did not show any fear as he roared. Roar! Roar! At this moment, a dragon's roar sounded from the dragon blood sword. The dragon blood sword was completely drawn. Boom! He waved his arm and the dragon blood sword attacked the group of people directly. Roar! Roar! Another dragon's roar sounded. A 7-colored divine dragon attacked them directly. Defend! The rest of you, attack and kill them! The 2 divine flames stared at the 7-colored divine dragon and immediately roared. Kill! Behind them, the faces of the 2,000 to 3,000 people revealed a cold killing intent as they roared loudly. Pun! However, when the 7-colored divine dragon landed on the bodies of the 2 divine flames, the body of the god completely descended. The chaotic 7-colored divine dragon directly passed through his body and destroyed his body. Not good! The other 2 gods who had followed closely behind the old man sensed that the old man's life force had instantly disappeared, and their faces revealed expressions of fear. It was already too late for them to dodge. Pun! The 7-colored divine dragon easily passed through their bodies, causing them to open their eyes wide, filled with a deathly gray color. Not good, Lord Fang and the others! The faces of the more than 2,000 people behind them revealed a terrified expression. When they saw the 3 gods who had lost their vitality in an instant, their faces were filled with shock. Oh no! At this moment, young Master Yun also realized that they had provoked Vicious. His face revealed a terrified expression, and he hurriedly wanted to escape to the back. Roar! Roar! However, a roar was even faster as it attacked them. Ah 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 ah! In an instant, a miserable scream sounded. You dare, you dare! I am a direct disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder. If you dare to kill me, we, Eternal Shocking Thunder, will not let you off! A fierce shout came from young Master Yun's mouth. At this moment, a purple bolt of lightning burst out from his chest. The thunderbolt completely protected him inside, and a black hole slowly appeared in the sky above him. The thunderbolt wanted to escape with him. What happened on the other side? On the other side, a group of Eternal God Yifang's disciples looked over, and their faces showed astonishment. Buzz, buzz, buzz! At this moment, 3 mournful sounds of heaven and earth rang out, making them slightly shocked. Those guys from Eternal Thunderclap have provoked a ruthless person. Ha ha, those 3 gods have been killed! A god's eyes lit up as he looked towards the opposite side. His face revealed a look of schadenfreude. Eh? Those 3 people are not from Eternal Thunderclap. How dare they kill the disciples of Eternal Thunderclap now? The people from Eternal Divine Leaf were slightly shocked as they looked over excitedly. You want to escape? Wang Xian saw the power of lightning on young Master Yun's body. A hint of surprise and coldness flashed in his eyes. He waved the dragon blood sword in his hand once again. A wave of destructive power landed directly on young Master Yun's body. Crack! Crack! The lightning started to flicker, and the black holes slowly dissipated. When young Master Yun saw this scene, a look of astonishment appeared on his face. No, no, how is this possible? How is this possible? The lightning protection power on his body could withstand the attacks from the 8 wisps of divine flames and below. Now, the young man had actually broken it. Death enveloped him, causing him to reveal a look of panic as he shouted loudly. Ka 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 ka! Don't kill me! Don't kill me! The lightning started to crack, and young Master Yun pleaded for mercy loudly with a face full of panic. Wang Xian watched this scene with an expressionless face. A guy who hasn't even ignited the divine fire dares to provoke an unknown god so arrogantly. Does he really think that he can act recklessly just by relying on the name of Eternal Thunderclap? He said faintly. Wang Xian had a hint of disdain towards this kind of disciple with a deep background. A background was a background, and one's own strength was one's own strength. One didn't know when one would meet someone who wasn't afraid of one's background and would kill one without any scruples. Wang Xian naturally wouldn't be used to such an arrogant disciple. He didn't care about one's background. No! A despairing and fearful voice rang out. The sharp sword pierced through his body and pierced through it. He widened his eyes. His pupils were filled with regret. He was the direct disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder. In the future, he would definitely ignite the divine fire and have a lifespan of 100,000 years. He didn't want to die. Buzz. Wang Xian swept his gaze over. With a wave of his arm, all the corpses were stored in the mother nest. Hiss! Damn, those three are ruthless. They actually killed the direct disciples of Eternal Shocking Thunder. Awesome! On the opposite side, the people from Eternal Godly Leaf heard the screams from the other side. All of them had shocked expressions on their faces. Few people dared to kill Eternal Thunder's direct disciples. Moreover, if they could kill Eternal Thunder's direct disciples, they would receive a huge reward. However, these direct disciples were not so easy to kill. Every disciple had a life-saving method, so it was very difficult to kill them. They dared to kill Eternal Thunder's direct disciples, so they are definitely not from the North region. Could they be from Eternal Leaf? It's very possible. The enemy of the enemy is a friend. Why don't we get to know them? The three of them aren't weak at all. The group discussed among themselves. In the end, their gazes landed on the two young men and women. The strength of the two young men and women had already reached the peak of the demigod realm. They wore green clothes and had a leaf on their chests. The two of them were the outstanding prodigies of Eternal Divine Leaf's generation. Although they were only at the peak of the demigod realm, with the divine weapons in their hands and the treasures on them, their combat power was no weaker than that of a god with a wisp of divine fire. Let's get to know each other. Maybe they are friends of our eastern region. The woman hesitated for a moment, then looked at the young man beside her and said, Okay. The young man also nodded. My friend in front, I'm Li Mayan, the Eternal Leaf God. I would like to make friends with the three of you. Li Mayan took a few steps forward and her voice traveled across the void. The Eternal Leaf God? Wang Xian heard the voice coming from the other side. He hesitated for a moment before flying over immediately. Chapter 2059 2059 Heaven and Earth Treasure. They are here! No hostility, don't worry! Li Mayan and the rest smiled when they saw Wang Xian and the rest flying over. After leaping over the dangerous tide, Wang Xian arrived at a spot about 100 meters in front of Li Mayan and the rest. Hello, the three of you. May I know if you are the experts from our eastern region? Li Mayan and the rest looked Wang Xian and the rest up and down and asked curiously. No, we want to go to the Eternal Leaf. The teleportation formation has been shut down, so we could only fly over. We happened to pass by and met those reckless fellows. Wang Xian glanced at them and said with a smile, Oh? Do you have any friends from the Eternal Leaf? An old man asked Wang Xian and the rest. Yes, I have friends there. Wang Xian did not hide anything and nodded his head. His gaze landed on the young man and woman with leaves on their green clothes. Are you the disciples of Eternal Leaf? He asked. You don't know our senior sister Li Mayan and senior brother Li Mulong? They are. That's right. We are the disciples of the Eternal Divine Leaves. We can be considered as core disciples. As soon as Wang Xian finished his sentence, a young man opened his mouth immediately. However, he was interrupted by Li Mulong as soon as he finished his sentence. We thought you guys were here to look for opportunities in the energy tide. Where are the three of you planning to go? Li Mulong continued to ask. To the center of the eternal divine leaves. Wang Xian replied directly. To the center of the eternal divine leaves? Are the three of you friends at the eternal kingdom? The three of you have helped us by killing the eternal thunderclap disciples. There is a formation that can teleport us upstream and allow us to enter the eternal kingdom quickly. Why don't the three of you follow us upstream? Li Mayan said to Wang Xian. Sure, thank you very much. Wang Xian cupped his hands and said with a smile. No need. The enemy of the enemy is a friend. Speaking of which, the three of you are really courageous. If Eternal Thunderclap finds out that you have killed the direct descendants of Eternal Thunderclap, they will definitely be attacked. Li Mulong reminded Wang Xian. Hee, I don't care about Eternal Thunderclap. In this vast void, if they still want to find trouble with us even if they don't have the strength, we will naturally kill them directly. Wang Xian smiled and said nonchalantly. In this vast void, who would know if they were killed? As for the people from Eternal Divine Leaf, they had nothing to do with it. Both parties were enemies to begin with, so it didn't affect him at all. This friend's attitude is really good. He doesn't look very old. To be able to become a god at such an age, he's really extraordinary. Li Mulong looked at him in a different light. We've got the treasure. Let's go. The three of you, just follow us. Li Mayan said to them and flew forward along the tide. According to them, that was the upstream of the tide and the location where the tide was near the black hole. Wang Xian didn't have any worries following them. As long as he entered the territory of the Eternal Divine Leaves, he had nothing to be afraid of. With two little girls around, who would dare to provoke him? Perhaps even the god of Divine Leaves would call him brother when he saw him. Right now, Wang Xian felt like he was relying on his daughter's influence. However, this feeling was pretty good too. The group flew forward and crossed half of the black hole in the northern region of the eastern region. The length of the black hole was extremely terrifying. We will reach the upstream area in front of us. There is a base of our Eternal Divine Leaves there. The three of you can teleport there. 5 hours later, an enormous continent appeared at the side of the energy tide. That's right, it was a continent with many buildings on it. In front of the continent, there were hundreds of millions of people, all at the demigod level. They were in front of the energy tide. Some were cultivating around, while others were staring at the energy tide. When they reached the upper reaches, the surrounding spiritual energy was about 10 times that of the outside world. It was a good place for many people to cultivate. Li Mayan pointed to the front and said to Wang Xian and the rest. Do all of these belong to the disciples of the Eternal Divine Leaf? Wang Xian looked at the hundreds of millions of people. Among them, there was no lack of godly state experts. He asked in slight astonishment. 50% of them are the disciples of our Eternal Divine Leaves. The rest are the forces that are attached to our Eternal Divine Leaves or the forces of our Eastern region. Our Eastern region is still relatively united. Everything is based on our Eternal Divine Leaves. Of course, we treat them much better than Eternal Thunderclap treats the powerhouses of the northern region. Li Mulong introduced them to Wang Xian. Are the three of you interested in joining our Eternal Divine Leaves? Joining us will bring you great benefits, Li Mayan said with a smile. No! Wang Xian shook his head. Li Mayan and the rest didn't force them. As the heavens' favorites of the Eternal Divine Leaves, they might not have bothered with them if it wasn't for the fact that Wang Xian and the rest were quite powerful. Hello, Senior Sister Li. Senior Brother Li, have you obtained the divine weapon? Voices of respect could be heard near the upper reaches of the continent. Clearly, Li Mayan and Li Mulong had some status in the entire Eternal Divine Leaf. Divine weapon? Wang Xian's eyes flickered slightly when he heard their conversation. Look, there's a powerful divine glow flickering in the middle of the tide. It must be an ultimate treasure of the divine realm. It must be. The spiritual treasure has transformed. There are even ferocious beasts of the tidal wave guarding the surroundings. This This is definitely an extremely powerful ultimate treasure of the heaven and earth. Just as they were about to enter the mainland, a series of exclamations were suddenly heard. Eh? Li Mayan and Li Mulong were slightly taken aback. They immediately looked towards the direction of the tidal wave. Wang Xian also raised his eyebrows and turned his head to look. That is? When his gaze swept across the area, a look of astonishment appeared in his eyes. At the center of the energy tide, a ball of white light was exceptionally eye-catching. In the sky above the white light, an illusion of 1,000 meters in size condensed. The illusion looked like a pair of wings. The white light flowed along the energy tide. The speed of the flow was not very fast. Moreover, there were tide beasts with huge wings around the white light. They were all around the holy white light. What level of treasure is that? It can cause such a huge phenomenon and even cause the protection of the energy beasts? Li Mulong and the rest were shocked. They were filled with shock. Squeak, squeak, squeak! At this moment, Wang Xian, who was at the side, sensed the excited cries of the treasure-hunting mouse in the mother nest. He moved his palm and the palm-sized treasure-hunting mouse appeared in his palm. His 6 tentacles were aimed at the spot where the white light was. This is an ultimate treasure of heaven and earth. Its level exceeds the detection range. Chapter 2060. 2060 was in his hands. This is a treasure of heaven and earth. Its level has exceeded the detection range. When Wang Xian sensed the information from the treasure-seeking ant, he was stunned. Its level has exceeded the detection range. How is this possible? You must know that this treasure-seeking ant is a divine beast of the bug race. There are very few treasures that it cannot detect. Wang Xian opened his mouth slightly and revealed a shocked expression. The treasure-seeking ant divine beast of the bug race was the strongest race in the universe back then. It was an existence that was comparable to the divine dragon race. Beyond the detection range. In other words, Wang Xian's eyes sparkled. It was beyond the detection range of the treasure-seeking ant. In other words, this treasure was definitely a treasure of heaven and earth. The energy tide this time is the largest in the past 100,000 years. Without the strength of 6 to 7 wisps of divine fire, it is impossible to enter the center. However, there are many treasures in the energy tide this time. I don't know what kind of treasures are inside the white light. There are even tidal beasts guarding it. Li Mulong's shocked voice rang out from the front. They ignored Wang Xian and flew directly to the edge of the energy tide. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, on the void continent behind them, numerous figures were also flying towards the edge of the energy tide. Let's go and take a look, Wang Xian said to Minghua and Yanghua and followed closely behind them. This place was tens of kilometers away from the energy tide. These tens of kilometers were just an instant problem for him. Rumble. When Wang Xian was close enough, the rumbling sound and the vastness of the energy tide assaulted him. Wang Xian stared at the energy tide in astonishment. This was the wonder of the universe. Make your move and seize this treasure. We can't let those guys from the Eternal Thunderclap get their hands on it. At this moment, dignified voices rang out from the sky. More than 10 figures flew into the energy tide, each of them possessing the strength of no less than 6 wisps of divine fire. Their figures moved and flew into the sky above the energy tide, directly grabbing towards the ball of white light in the middle. So. Ha ha ha, this treasure belongs to our eternal shocking thunder. From the opposite side, a similar unbridled voice rang out. A huge metal claw was clawing towards the white light. Divine weapon, heaven probing claw. This divine weapon has grabbed many divine weapons from the energy tide. Oh no, they have used the heaven-probing claw. Around Wang Xian, the people around him cried out in surprise when they saw the huge claw that was emitting divine light clawing towards the white light. Block the heaven-probing claw. The faces of the eternal thunderclap experts stiffened when they saw the metal claw. The old man in the middle immediately roared. Boom! 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 Numerous attacks were launched towards the metal claw in the energy tide. buzz. However, they were already prepared at the opposite position. Streams of energy blocked their attacks. Enter the energy tide! When the Eternal Leaf experts saw this, their expressions changed, and they jumped into the energy tide. Roar! Roar! Within the energy tide, the metallic sky-piercing claw emitted a divine light, and the 10-meter-long claw rapidly expanded, enveloping the white light. However, at this moment, the energy beasts around the white light let out roars. Their enormous wings flapped the tides in front of them. The tides around them seemed to be under control as they directly attacked the sky-reaching claw. In an instant, the tides around the white light seemed to be 10 times more ferocious as waves of terrifying energy washed towards the sky-reaching claw. Ayo, ayo! Mournful sounds rang out from the sky-reaching claw as a claw actually slowly cracked under the impact of the energy. Not good, those tide beasts are very terrifying. The Eternal Leaf Gods, who had already charged into the energy tide, were shocked when they saw this scene. The sky-reaching claw was able to directly charge into the energy tide, and it was already a divine weapon of the 7th level of the deity realm. However, such a divine weapon was actually shattered by the impact of the energy tide. It could be imagined that the energy of the tide could already threaten peak-stage deity realm experts. Among them, there was no peak-stage deity realm expert. Oh no! On the opposite side, the Eternal Leaf Gods' expressions changed drastically as they hurriedly withdrew their heaven-probing claws. The area covered by the white light continued to flow along the energy tide. The Eternal Thunder and Eternal Leaf Gods stopped. They floated in the air with solemn expressions. What a terrifying tidal beast! This is only the attack of one tidal beast. There are at least a dozen tidal beasts gathered there. They can control the tides and use the power of the tides to threaten peak god-level experts. Some gods were shocked when they saw the divine weapon, the heaven-probing claw, fall. Such a terrifying tidal beast is guarding the white light. What level is the treasure in the white light? It should be at least at the peak of the godly realm, right? Many people around were staring at the white light with burning eyes. In the sky above the energy tide, the gods of the two major factions were staring at the white light in the tide with furrowed brows. An elder from Eternal Shocking Thunder looked at the heaven-probing claw in his hand with an ugly expression. What a powerful energy tide and tide demonic beasts! This won't do. I can't do anything even if I enter by myself. When Wang Xian saw this scene, a solemn expression appeared on his face. The hundreds of millions of people around him looked at the white light flowing along the tide in astonishment. Although the speed of the white light was not very fast, it was still tens of thousands of meters per second. In the sky, the gods of the two major forces were following in the sky. They were not in a hurry or taking any risks. This was because the energy tide had an end. As long as they reached the end of the energy tide, they would be able to deal with the energy beasts inside. At that time, they would naturally be able to obtain treasures. Walala! All of a sudden, at this moment, a sound that sounded like a huge wave was heard. The energy tide has changed. It is no longer pure spiritual energy. Instead, it is a tide formed by water elemental energy, the ocean tide. Before Wang Xian could turn his head to take a look, exclamations could be heard from the surroundings. Oh no, the white light has stopped. It's actually going against the current. It wants to return to the black hole of the tide. It actually wants to return to the black hole of the tide. More voices could be heard. Everyone quickly looked over. They saw that the white light that was originally following the energy tide was actually going against the current. This was an extremely rare occurrence. Once the white light went against the current and entered the tidal black hole, it would completely disappear. Divine artifacts possess spirituality, but very few could go against the current and tide. Ocean tide against the current? At the edge, Wang Xian saw the white light that was going against the current and gradually entering the ocean tide. His eyes sparkled and he was tempted. Should I give it a try? Chapter 2061. 2061 made his move. The tides of the universe were ever changing. 1 second, the tide of spiritual energy was flowing out of the black hole, and the next second, it was the tide of flames. Next, it would be the tide of the lust, the tide of the ocean, and so on. No one knew how long the tide of spiritual energy would last, or how long the tide of flames would last. It could be thousands of years, or even days. The energy tide in front of them had changed from the spiritual energy tide just now to the ocean tide. The ocean tide formed by water energy was a huge opportunity for the water element cultivators. The water element cultivators could enter the ocean to cultivate. Even the gods had great benefits. The divine dragon clan was the lord of the ocean. Regardless of which element the divine dragon belonged to, their strength would not be affected in the slightest when they entered the ocean. In fact, their speed would even be slightly faster. This was due to the bloodline of the divine dragons. Water affinity, water affinity. The spiritual energy tide turning into the ocean tide was a very beneficial thing for Wang Xian. He already had the water element. The influence of the tide on him was at least 2 to 3 times less than before. With this speed, the treasure will enter the black hole in 10 minutes at most. I wonder if the lords can get their hands on this treasure. Li Mayan frowned as she watched this scene and said softly, "This treasure's grade is definitely not low. It's protected by a powerful tide beast, and it also has such a strong spirituality." Li Mulong's face was also filled with astonishment as he said this. Unfortunately, a treasure of this grade was simply not something they could obtain. They were already very lucky to be able to obtain a divine weapon. "We, the water elemental lords, have made our move!" The treasure within the white light flowed in reverse. At this time, the gods couldn't hold it in any longer. A few of the water elemental gods immediately entered the tide and grabbed towards the treasure. Boom! Boom! When the gods got close, they were immediately attacked by the tide beasts. However, this time, the water elemental gods that entered weren't afraid of the tide beasts because of the ocean tide. "Water net, stop them!" A god held a divine staff in his hand, and a powerful water-type god formed an incomparably huge fishing net, fishing towards the white light. Walala! However, the moment the fishing net fell, what shocked everyone was that bone spikes suddenly attacked the fishing net, easily cutting off its restraints. Not good. In the ocean tide, even if we are water-type gods, under the impact of the ocean tide, our attack power will be weakened by more than 10 times. Unless we use divine artifacts or defense to pass through this group of tide beasts. The 9 wisps of divine fire god, who had released the net, growled with an ugly expression. Any energy that falls on the tide will be washed away by 90% of the attack. Using physical strength to enter is a good choice. You can also enter the ocean tide with a strong earth attribute defensive power. Wang Xian watched as the gods on the vast ocean tide attacked continuously. Let's give it a try. Seeing that the white light would return to the black hole in 7 to 8 minutes, Wang Xian decided to give it a try. Whoosh! His body moved and he immediately flew into the ocean tide. Dragon King! Ming Huyanghua and Li Mulong looked bitter when they saw this scene and shouted. Eh? This friend actually dared to fly over. Li Mayan and Li Mulong's expressions changed slightly as they hurriedly looked over. Something bad will happen if he goes over so rashly. If he wants to enter the center of the tidal wave, he must at least have the strength of 7 wisps of divine fire. Even if he is of the water attribute, he must at least have the strength of 5 wisps of divine fire. Li Mayan's expression was a little unsightly. She quickly spoke to Minghua and Yanghua. Our Dragon King is very strong. He should be fine. Both of their expressions were uncertain as they spoke with uncertainty. Not only do we have to be careful of the demon beasts of the energy tide and energy tide, but we also have to be careful of the pantheon of eternal thunder. Li Mulong's brows followed closely as he stared at Wang Xian's figure. Someone is flying over again. Even Lord Proverbs and the rest are unable to obtain that treasure. There are still people who dare to fly over. Which god is that? He looks so young. Some people noticed Wang Xian's figure and saw him immediately. Plop. Wang Xian did not fly towards the sky. Instead, he entered the energy tide directly from the edge. If one considered the energy tide as an ocean, the depth of this ocean was millions of kilometers. The flow of the ocean tide at the edge was not a trace. The strength of a demigod could withstand it. Wang Xian's body shook slightly. The yin-yang 5 elements alms bowl slowly surrounded his body. Around the yin-yang 5 elements alms bowl, streams of water slowly covered it. Water-blue dragon scales appeared on the surface of his body. With 3 layers of protection, Wang Xian unleashed his strongest defense. Buzz. His body moved and easily traversed dozens of kilometers under the sea. The further he went in, the greater the resistance. When he was more than 100 kilometers away from the center, he even had to unleash 20% of his strength to withstand the impact of the ocean tide. The water in the ocean tide is holy water to ordinary people. The speed of water attribute cultivators cultivating here is comparable to the cultivation speed in the Dragon Palace. As he sensed his surroundings, Wang Xian's eyes sparkled. He looked ahead. Within the ocean tide, his yin-yang and 5 elements dragon eyes could only see a distance of more than 10 kilometers. There are 15 tide demonic beasts, and each of them is not weaker than 8 wisps of divine fire. Only the strength of 9 wisps of divine fire in the energy tide can contend with them. Because of the divine dragon bloodline, I control the 4 seas. I can barely exert 80% of my strength here. Wang Xian stared ahead, his eyes flashing with brilliance. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, Wang Xian saw a god emitting a powerful aura entering the tidal wave of the ocean. He was prepared for a final battle. If they were to see this treasure entering the tidal wave of the black hole, they would be unwilling to accept it. When the eternal leaves of God entered the tidal wave, a figure swept a glance at Wang Xian. However, he also saw that Wang Xian had entered the tidal wave from their side. He ignored it, and flew towards the location of the white light. Roar! Roar! One by one, the tide beasts saw the gods entering and attacked the gods that were approaching them. Their bodies were as big as fish, but they had claws and a pair of bone wings. Their bodies were pale white and they looked a little ferocious. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, more than 10 gods from Eternal Thunderclap entered the other side and grabbed towards the white light. Roar! Roar! A total of more than 30 gods from the 2 major forces immediately surrounded the white light. The 15 tidal beasts roared coldly. They controlled the surrounding tides to attack them. Wang Xian did not hesitate and rushed towards the white light. Chapter 2062 2062 On the Sacred Wings of No Beginning. At this time, he had to rush over. It was impossible for him to just sit back and reap the benefits. Not to mention whether he had the chance or not. Even if he had the chance, he could not just wait by the side and take action. Otherwise, the moment he took the opportunity to rush over, he would be attacked by everyone. Perhaps even the people of Eternal Divine Leaf would attack him. After all, he did not know his identity as the Eternal Divine Leaves. At this moment, he had to make a move together with the gods of the Eternal Divine Leaves. Clang! He moved his palm and pulled out the dragon blood sword in his hand. Streams of water gathered on it. Wang Xian attacked a tide demon beast in front of him. The water condensed into the head of the water dragon and attacked the tide demon beast directly. Around the tidal beast there were 2 gods with 8 wisps of divine fire. They were delighted when they saw Wang Xian's attack. My friend, let's work together to destroy this demonic beast. The rest of the demonic beasts are trapped. As long as we kill it, we will be able to enter the white light. A middle-aged man shouted at Wang Xian. All right. Wang Xian nodded his head and moved his body. His entire body was enveloped by the water currents and the yin-yang 5 elements alms bowl as he flew over. The energy tide demonic beast was more than 100 meters in size. It wasn't very big, but its 2 bone wings and 2 claws were extremely tough. The attacks of the other 2 gods landed on it one by one, leaving only a trace. Its body is very tough. Be careful! another elder reminded loudly. It's very tough. I would like to see if this fellow's body is tough, or if the dragon blood sword in my hand is tough. Wang Xian's body shimmered as he appeared in front of one of the claws of the energy-tied demon beast in a flash. He raised the dragon blood sword in his hand and slashed it down heavily. Bang! A terrifying collision was transmitted from the energy tide. A huge crack appeared on the demon beast's claw. He was not surprised by this at all. What a sharp blood sword! The two middle-aged elders looked over and were astonished. Hurry up and help! Wang Xian was not complacent at all. With a swing of his sword, the demonic beast was injured. A huge bone wing directly slashed towards Wang Xian. The sharp bone spike left a terrifying mark in the energy tide. Raging Sea! An elder held a divine staff in his hand and pointed directly at the bone wing. The bottom of the energy tide stirred up a huge wave and hit the bone wings hard. Thunder! Another old man held a hammer of lightning and smashed it at the tide demon beast. Crack! 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 Bolts of lightning sounded and caused the body of the tide demon beast to roll. Go to hell! Wang Xian held the dragon blood sword in his hand and slashed it at the head of the demon beast. Bang! A powerful collision sound rang out. The dragon blood sword in Wang Xian's hand slashed into the skull of the monster and sank into a depth of 5 to 6 meters. However, it was very difficult to kill a demon beast at the celestial stage. There were almost no vitals for a celestial stage expert unless they were completely destroyed. Roar! 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 At this moment, the screams of the demon beast could be heard from the side. Wang Xian looked over and saw that a tide demon beast had been killed. Eternal Thunderclap and the rest have killed the demonic beast. Stop them! The gods of Eternal Divine Leaf looked over and immediately gave up on attacking the tide demonic beast in front of them. Instead, they tried to stop the two figures who were flying towards the white light. Get lost, you useless Eternal Divine Leaf! The two gods with 9 wisps of divine fire roared furiously. Streams of terrifying energy surged within the ocean tides. In the sky, huge tidal waves that were tens of thousands of meters high were created. The gods are fighting! Hiss, I wonder who will be able to obtain this treasure. Hopefully, it will be our Eternal Divine Leaf. At least hundreds of millions of people gathered around the two sides. When they saw the huge tidal waves in the sky, their expressions changed slightly. Oh no, a battle has broken out below. I'm afraid that our friend is doomed. Even if his strength is not weak, the death rate is still very high if he enters recklessly. Li Mian, Li Mulong, and the rest looked worried when they saw the surging tide of the ocean. They had a good impression of Wang Xian. The chaotic battle within the energy tide began. Bang! Wang Xian's right arm turned into a dragon claw as he approached the direction of the Eternal Divine Leaf. The dragon claw held the dragon blood sword and smashed heavily onto the body of the tide demon beast. The tidal beast flew backward along with the tide. Charge in! At this moment, the middle-aged man and the old man who were fighting together with Wang Xian swept their gaze across and charged directly toward the white light. If you don't let us get it, you can forget about getting the treasure inside the Eternal Divine Leaf. However, at this moment, 3 figures charged toward them. This is our chance. Wang Xian looked at the middle-aged man who was rushing towards him and his body suddenly accelerated. How dare you ignore me? You are courting death. A lightning barrier was launched towards Wang Xian's body. The exploding lightning barrier even created a hollow area around the surrounding energy tide. Wang Xian sensed the violent attack and his heart skipped a beat. The middle-aged man who was attacking him was the god of the 9 divine flames. Nothingness! At this moment, the yin-yang 5 elements alms bowl on his body flickered with the power of light and darkness. His body turned into nothingness for a short period of time. Buzz! Wang Xian's body shuttled through the violent lightning shield. Crack! Crack! At the last moment, he was struck by a bolt of lightning on his shoulder. Fortunately, the layers of defense on his body blocked it. Wang Xian burst out with all his speed. With a flash from a distance of 10 kilometers, he charged straight into the white light. What? Damn it, one of the Eternal Leaf's fellows has entered. We can't let them succeed. When the middle-aged man saw Wang Xian enter, his expression changed drastically. He immediately shouted loudly, "Stall them and give our people a chance!" When the gods of the eternal divine leaves heard this, they revealed an excited look on their faces. They immediately shouted loudly. Wang Xian, who had entered the white light, was slightly delighted when he heard the sounds outside. It was just as he had expected. Void was the greatest confidence that Wang Xian had when he barged in. It was also the more heaven-defying ability that he had mastered at the moment. Just like the void of the Ao Yao, it could be immune to any attack in an instant. However, the moment Wang Xian entered, a bone thorn pierced through him at a terrifying speed. Not good! At this moment, his expression changed drastically. A bone thorn pierced through his ribs directly. The intense pain was extremely painful. Damn it, what is this thing? His face was filled with shock. A terrifying luster shot out from his eyes as he stared forward. What entered his eyes was a pair of bone wings. It was completely different from the white bone wings that were condensed by the shadow in the sky. This pair of white bone wings was about 10 meters wide. They were formed from bones, and there wasn't the slightest sense of beauty. The entire pair of bone wings didn't contain any attributes. Other than this faint white light, there wasn't the slightest sense of holiness, or even a terrifying might. It was as if this was just a simple, indestructible bone. One of the bones pierced through his ribs, causing his body to tremble. Chapter 2063. 2063 Under the 2063 Uninitiated Holy Wings. Is this a treasure or a monster? That's not right. According to the information on the treasure-seeking ant, this is a treasure. The higher the level of the treasure, the stronger the spirituality it possesses. A treasure of the godly state can already communicate with humans. Based on the investigation of the treasure-seeking ant, this treasure is definitely of a higher level than a divine artifact. Wang Xian stared at the bone wings that had penetrated his body. A look of horror appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and wanted to fly backward to escape from the strange bone wings. Buzz. However, the moment he moved, the strange bone spikes followed his movements. There was no way for him to escape. Damn it! How did I come across such a strange treasure? Wang Xian's face turned black. He gritted his teeth and tore open his ribs to forcefully escape from the bone spikes. Crack! Crack! The sound of his ribs breaking could be heard. Enduring the intense pain, Wang Xian tore his ribs apart and forcefully moved the bone spike away. Phew! Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, there was a bone thick in the middle of the two bone wings. This bone spike was very short, as though it was embedded in his body. Before he could react, the short spike in the middle of the two bone wings had penetrated into his back. There was an intense collision, as if the bone wings were about to penetrate into his body. However, how could such a good thing happen? Even though the short thorn was not long, it was still about a meter long. The short thorn had penetrated Wang Xian's back in an instant. Ah! The sound of pain was heard. Wang Xian's expression changed drastically as a hint of panic appeared in his eyes. Oh no! He's devouring my bones! At this moment, Wang Xian's pupils contracted slightly. He felt that the short thorn in the middle was about to devour his bones. It was as if it was treating his bones as food. Damn it, what the hell is this? His face was filled with panic. It was not worth it to die in the hands of the skeletal wings. Even if he could revive, it would be a huge loss for him. Heart of light and darkness! Wang Xian sensed that his bones were being devoured bit by bit. He sensed that the short bone was located at the heart. Immediately, he had an idea. The heart of light and darkness was the most precious treasure in the universe. It was the most important treasure of the divine dragon of light and darkness, who was at the peak of the universe. Buzz. The heart of light and darkness trembled slightly. A force of light and darkness slowly surrounded the bone wings and confronted it. The devouring force dissipated in an instant. However, that was all. The heart of light and darkness could only protect itself, and did not retaliate at all. Now that Wang Xian was the owner of the heart of light and darkness, he needed to mobilize all the power. Phew! Seeing that the strange bone wings were no longer devouring his bones, Wang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Buzz! Just when Wang Xian thought that he was out of danger, the two bone spurs on the left and right wings behind him attacked him directly. Wang Xian didn't even have the strength to resist the attack in an instant. At this moment, Wang Xian's face turned completely black. The two bone spurs on his left and right pierced through his body. The devouring force was transmitted once again. Wang Xian took a deep breath and wanted to use the power of the heart of light and darkness. However, the heart of light and darkness didn't react at all. It was as if he could only balance the short spur in the middle. Do I really have to die here because of this strange bone thorn? Wang Xian's expression changed. For a moment, he had no choice but to wait for death. Hungry! Eat! 5 seconds later, Wang Xian's forehead was filled with cold sweat. Faint fluctuations suddenly entered his mind. Eat? Hungry? He was slightly stunned as his eyes flickered. Is this thing hungry? Do you want to eat something? Wang Xian's expression changed. Let's make a bet. If you want to eat, I'll let you eat. Wang Xian gritted his teeth. The area behind him moved slightly and the virtual image of the Divine Kingdom's Dragon Palace appeared slightly. Roar! Roar! 2 low roars were heard. The avatar of the Divine Wind Dragon and the avatar of the Divine Thunder Dragon were slowly separated. Disperse the flesh and let him devour it. Wang Xian had a total of 7 avatars. As these 7 avatars were connected to his body, he could summon them instantly through the Dragon Palace of the Divine Kingdom. The 2 avatars appeared in the form of the Divine Dragon. The 2 avatars trembled slightly and their flesh and blood were completely dispersed. The remaining bones looked extremely eerie and ferocious. The 2 avatars opened their mouths and bit towards the bone wings. Before the 2 doppelgangers could bite down, the bone spikes pierced through the head of the doppelgangers. In an instant, Wang Xian could feel that the devouring power of the 2 bone spikes in his body had completely disappeared. He could sense that the 2 doppelgangers were being devoured at a rapid speed. The most important thing for this doppelganger is the dragon's soul. Since you have devoured the bones of the dragon's soul, you should devour the dragon's soul as well. Wang Xian's eyes flickered as a hint of malevolence appeared on his face. The 2 clones that were thousands of meters long were being devoured at a terrifying speed. Wang Xian could sense the bones of the dragon soul's follower entering the wings of the bone wings. Take over this bone wings! Wang Xian's heart stirred as the 2 dragon souls slowly covered the entire bone wings. Roar! Roar! A soundless roar sounded from within the bone wings. Wang Xian could sense that there seemed to be a living being inside the bone wings. This was the soul of this treasure. Devour him! Wang Xian ordered with a slightly ferocious expression. Roar! Roar! The 2 dragon souls immediately went to devour the soul within the bone wings. Roar! Roar! The soul seemed to be abnormally furious and immediately began to retaliate. However, this soul seemed to have been born not too long ago, and its offensive power was not that strong. In a split second, it immediately dodged to the spot where the short thorn pierced into Wang Xian's body. Buzz! When he entered the short spike, he released a surge of energy and blocked the attack of the 2 dragon souls directly. It was trembling as it hit inside and didn't move at all. Wang Xian frowned slightly when he saw this situation. The spot where the short spike was located seemed to be the center of his body. The 2 dragon souls couldn't do anything to it even if it hid inside. After all, this was his home. Wang Xian raised his eyebrows. With a thought, he flapped his wings slightly. Now, he could easily control the 2 bone wings. At the same time, a piece of information was transmitted to his mind. Inceptive Holy Wings. This was the name of the bone wings. It sounded very cool, but according to the information in his mind, the inceptive holy wings didn't have any attributes. Its attack power was very strong, but the prerequisite was that it could hit someone. The only function was that it was very fast. With the flapping of the wings, it could burst out the speed of a peak godly state. If the soul at the short point could cooperate with it, its speed might be even faster. No matter how I look at it, this effect doesn't match with a high-level treasure. Furthermore, it almost died at the hands of this guy. Even so, 2 of my clones have perished. Wang Xian frowned. At this moment, his expression was extremely weak. He looked at his chest where he was pierced through. With a slight movement, he placed the short bone wing beside the heart of light and darkness. The heart of light and darkness could block the power of the Primalis holy wings. Crash! With a thought, a bone wing that was 20 meters wide appeared behind him. Chapter 2064. 2064 Ad in 2064. Each bone wing was about 10 meters in size. The white bone wings did not have any attributes. Wang Xian was floating in the middle of the ocean tide. The bone wings did not look beautiful at all. However, the entire bone wing did not have any attributes. It looked rather useless. Buzz. He moved slightly and streams of water flowed onto the body of the bone wings. Buzz. When the bone wings were covered by the water, Wang Xian's expression changed slightly. His expression became more interesting. He relaxed his entire body and did not use any energy. At this moment, a strange scene appeared. Wang Xian's body was not impacted by the ocean tides. Is this the ability of the bone wings? His face was filled with joy. Ignore the impact of the ocean tide? Only 7 wisps of divine fire could stand in the ocean tide. The gods of the 6 wisps of divine fire would not die if they entered the ocean tide. However, they would be washed away by the ocean tide. There was no way for them to stand in the ocean tide. However, he could stand in the ocean tide just by covering the water attribute on the bone wings. This kind of energy was rather powerful. In other words, with this bone wings, I can ignore any environment and unleash the strength of the peak of the godly state. Wang Xian's eyes flickered. With a slight movement of his body, he left this space immediately. Ah! Just as Wang Xian came out, a scream was heard. Wang Xian quickly looked over and saw a group of more than 30 people fighting in front of him. The eyes of more than 30 people were completely bloodshot. They didn't even notice that there was a change in the area covered by the white light just now. Fan Tian! The faces of more than 10 people from the eternal divine leaves changed drastically when they heard the scream. They shouted in unison. Ha ha ha, you trash from the eternal divine leaves! Even if we can't get the treasure today, it's still worth it to be able to kill 2 of you who have 8 wisps of divine fire. Ha! An elder of eternal thunderclap held the long spear in his hand with a ferocious expression. The long spear was covered in lightning and completely penetrated the middle-aged man in front of him. The middle-aged man's face was filled with despair. Eternal thunderclap, you are courting death! The eternal divine leaves looked over and revealed an extremely furious expression. 8th elder, that fellow from eternal divine leaves has come out. He has obtained the treasure! At this moment, a middle-aged man from eternal thunderclap saw Wang Xian who was beside the white light. He looked shocked and shouted immediately. Eh? At this moment, everyone looked towards Wang Xian's position. The bone wings on his body are that treasure. It's the bone wings! An elder from eternal thunderclap shouted immediately. Wang Xian ignored their gazes and looked at the fallen middle-aged man with a frown. The fallen middle-aged man was the middle-aged man who had attacked the tide demonic beast with him not long ago. He did not expect that this middle-aged man would actually die because of this. Swoosh! His gaze swept across the group of experts with eternal shock. After hesitating for a moment, he moved his body and flew directly towards the top of the ocean tide. Splash! Wang Xian easily rushed out of the ocean tide and hovered in the sky. Someone is coming out! When Wang Xian rushed out of the ocean tide, Hundreds of millions of people on both sides were flying towards the top of the ocean tide. Eh? It doesn't seem to be our Lord Eternal shocking thunder. At the north side, some people were looking at him in astonishment. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, figures rushed out from the ocean tide. A few of them attacked Wang Xian directly. Wang Xian looked over and saw 3 gods of 9 wisps of divine fire, eternal thunderclap, attacking him. The 3 of them had cold killing intent on their faces as they stared at the bone wings on his back. Leave the treasure behind! An old man roared and threw the lightning spear in his hand directly at Wang Xian. Buzz! Wang Xian's heart skipped a beat. His bone wings flapped slightly and his figure disappeared instantly. He flew towards the eastern region. What a fast speed! The expressions of the 3 gods with 9 wisps of divine fire changed slightly. They were shocked. Such speed was comparable to the peak of the godly state. This bone wings is definitely a very precious treasure, an elder growled in a low voice. Whoosh! 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 The sound of water breaking could be heard from below. The 3 of them looked at each other and hurriedly retreated. Eternal divine leaf, you exchanged 2 gods with 8 wisps of divine fire for a treasure. It's too good for you. The gods of eternal shock roared in dissatisfaction. Bullshit, one of you has fallen as well. A burly old man who had rushed out from the ocean tide shouted furiously when he heard their words. Haha, that 8-wisp divine fire god exchanged for a treasure. We exchanged it for you. The eternal thunderclap expert immediately laughed maniacally as he replied. Although the bone wings looked extraordinary, it was worth it for an 8-wisp divine fire god to exchange for a treasure. What? 2 of our lords have died. The treasure has been obtained by us. Who is the lord who obtained the treasure? I don't know him. I don't think our eternal divine leaves has such a young god. It's that person. In the eastern region, everyone had an ugly expression on their faces when they heard the words of the gods. Some of them looked at Wang Xian with a puzzled expression. However, Li Mayan, Li Melong, and the rest immediately recognized Wang Xian. They opened their mouths slightly and revealed shocked expressions. Not only did he come out alive, but he also obtained that supreme treasure. Was it the bone wings? Li Melong and the rest were extremely shocked. Buzz! The bone wings were flapped once again, and Wang Xian appeared beside them in an instant. With a slight movement of his conviction, the bone wings slowly retracted into Wang Xian's body. Dragon King! Ming Huiyang and Huiyang immediately walked forward and shouted in astonishment. This friend you... Li Melong and the rest stared at Wang Xian in astonishment. They were beyond shocked. Who is he? I don't know. However, he knows Li Melong and the rest. He should be the lord of our eternal divine leaf. He looks so young. More people looked at Wang Xian, their faces filled with doubt. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, the gods of the eternal leaf flew over from the ocean tide. They were also staring at Wang Xian, and their expressions were unsightly. They didn't know this young man or the god who obtained the treasure. More than 10 gods flew over to Wang Xian. The lords are here! When Li Mayan saw the lords flying over, her expression changed and she frowned. They knew that Wang Xian wasn't someone from the eternal divine leaf. Now that he had obtained the treasure, the eternal divine leaf had lost 2 gods with 8 wisps of divine fire. This? Little brother, who are you? Which faction are you from? At this moment, more than 10 top-notch experts from Eternal Leaf came to Wang Xian and surrounded him without leaving a trace. Chapter 2065. 2065 joined in. Our lords don't know who that youth is either. This, our eternal divine leaf lost 2 gods, all to cover up. Which faction does that youth come from? He doesn't look old, but to be able to enter the center of the ocean tide, his strength must be extraordinary. When everyone saw the group of people surrounding the young man who had obtained the treasure, they were astonished. Wang Xian looked at the gods surrounding the eternal divine leaves and frowned slightly. If it wasn't for their resistance, it would have been difficult for him to obtain the incorporeal holy wings. I'm Wang Xian, from the Dragon Palace. He looked at the gods of the eternal divine leaves and cupped his hands to show his respect. Dragon Palace? The gods looked at each other and revealed a puzzled expression. In that case, you are no longer a member of the eternal divine leaves. The old man in the middle took a step forward and locked his gaze on Wang Xian. He is a friend, not an enemy, Wang Xian said to him calmly. If you say he's a friend, then he's a friend? We have lost 2 experts because of this treasure. Hand over this treasure or else. A burly middle-aged man growled in a low voice with an embarrassed look on his face. 9th Elder, they were brought here by us. At this moment, Li Mayan, who was standing at the side, hesitated for a moment before speaking to the elders of the eternal divine leaf. Oh? The gods looked at Li Mayan. We were fighting with Eternal Thunder's disciples for a divine weapon downstream. After that, we saw that they killed all of Eternal Thunder's people, including 3 gods, and a direct descendant of Eternal Thunder was also killed by them. They wanted to go to our center, so we brought them here. Li Mayan told them everything. Huh! They killed a direct disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder? The old man who was addressed as Elder Jiu raised his eyebrows and looked at Wang Xian. The eyes of the rest of the Eternal Divine Leaves gods flickered slightly. It was much harder to kill a direct disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder than an ordinary god. Those who dared to kill a direct disciple of Eternal Shocking Thunder were considered friends in their Eternal Divine Leaves. Even if you are our friend, in order to protect you, Eternal Shocking Thunder sacrificed 2 gods with 8 wisps of divine fire. You still have to hand over that treasure. The burly middle-aged man retracted the coldness on his face and said to Wang Xian expressionlessly, It's impossible for me to give you the bone wings. In order to obtain that treasure, I paid a huge price. Wang Xian looked at the middle-aged man and shook his head. Huh! The burly middle-aged man slowly emitted a wave of pressure. Let's change the conditions. After all, I can obtain this treasure with your help, Wang Xian said directly to them. The reason why he was able to obtain the incorporeal holy wings this time was because they were able to hold off the eternal thunderclap experts. Otherwise, he would never have obtained this treasure. Furthermore, he felt a little guilty about the 2 people who were killed. He, Wang Xian, would not ignore them since he was the cause. You are not the enemy, and we will not make an enemy out of you. However, we have lost 2 gods with 8 wisps of divine fire because of this. Even if we killed one of them, we still lost one. This way, join us with the Eternal Divine Leaf and use our military merits to offset this treasure. Or you can take out enough items to compensate us. If you don't choose either, we will have to take the treasure away from you. Elder Jiu said to Wang Xian and gave him 2 options. Military merits? Wang Xian looked at them in puzzlement. That's right, it's military merits. You can obtain military merits by killing the person who killed Eternal Thunderclap and handing over the treasure. As long as you have sufficient military merits, you can even seek guidance from the Divine Master Shinai. Elder Jiu spoke to him indifferently and stared at him with a burning gaze. Make your choice. Then I choose to join Eternal Divine Leaf. Wang Xian pondered for a moment and nodded his head. All right, let's get straight to the point. Don't even think about leaving. Otherwise, we will announce that you killed Eternal Thunderclap's disciple. In addition, we will also hunt you down. If you offend 2 eternal forces, there will be no place for you in the entire endless star field. Elder Jiu said indifferently. He looked at Li Mu Yan and the others. Introduce these friends to us. Get familiar with them. Let's go. We are preparing to send off Fang Tian and Meng Han brothers. Elder Jiu looked at the surrounding gods and said indifferently, Okay. Everyone nodded and turned around to leave. They had been fighting against the Eternal Thunderbolt for tens of thousands of years. Every time a powerful treasure appeared, a powerful god would definitely die. This was not the first time they had encountered such a situation. Everyone was prepared for this. Wang Xian watched them leave and did not say anything. The reason why he chose to join this place was because the two gods died because of him. Other than that, there was another important thing. He wanted to stay in this energy tide for a period of time. Now that he had the Primalist holy wings, he had no effect in traveling through the energy tide. He could obtain many treasures here. Furthermore, the two of them had fallen largely because of him. At the very least, I want to kill a few eternal thunderclap fellows as a sacrifice for their souls in heaven. Wang Xian mumbled. Brother Wang Xian, right? It's a good choice for you to join our eternal thunderclap. You look so young. I didn't expect you to be so strong. Li Mulong smiled at Wang Xian. Please tell me about your military merits. Wang Xian smiled and asked him. Young Master Wang Xian, let me tell you. The energy tide is a land of treasures. It is the boundary between the eastern and northern regions. At the same time, it is also a battlefield. The battlefield between us and Eternal Thunderclap often erupts in battles for various treasures. For this reason, our Lord Shinai has established military merits here. The more treasures we obtain and the more enemies we kill, the more military merits we obtain. Military merits can be exchanged for treasures. We can even invite our Lord Shinai to guide us in our cultivation. If you have sufficient military merits, our Eternal Divine Leaf's experts might take you in as a disciple. You might even be able to obtain a very high position if you join the Eternal Divine Leaf. Li Mayan explained to Wang Xian. I'll bring you to the Military Merits Hall now. You'll know once you see it. Once the number of military merits reaches a certain level, you can even mobilize some of our disciples to work together. I see. Wang Xian nodded. In order to motivate the disciples and people from the eastern region to come here to fight against Eternal Thunderclap, Eternal Divine Leaf had set up military merits. This military merit was really effective. Together with this treasure land, hundreds of millions of people were spread around. Chapter 2066 2066 I have a predestined relationship with this treasure. Military Merit Hall! Following Li Mayan to the Military Merit Hall, Wang Xian read the messages one by one. Military merits were divided into 9 levels. 1 leaf was the lowest and 9 leaves were the highest. Each person's military merits could be displayed. The person with 1 leaf embroidered on his chest represented the person with 1 leaf. The person with 2 leaves embroidered on his chest represented the person with 2 leaves. In order to advance from 1 leaf to 2 leaves, one needed to complete 10 one-leaf military merits. Killing a god with 1 wisp of divine fire from eternal shocking thunder could obtain 5 one-leaf military merits. A divine artifact with 1 wisp of divine fire was equivalent to 10 one-leaf military merits. One could directly become a 2-leaf military merits person. And so on. After becoming a 5-leaf military merits person, one could mobilize some of the power of eternal shocking thunder. If he wanted to join the Eternal Divine Leaf completely, he would be able to obtain great power. Of course, to be able to become a 5-leaf meritorious serviceman, his own strength would be able to ignite at least 6 wisps of divine fire. Other than that, he would also be able to obtain a divine weapon by consuming military credits. In short, military credits had many benefits. Wang Xian took a brief look before he decided to join the Eternal Divine Leaf. Young Master Wang, what our 9th elder means is that young Master Wang can only leave this place after becoming a 7-leaf meritorious serviceman. However, there's no need to be anxious, young Master Wang. With your strength, you might be able to become a 7-leaf meritorious serviceman in less than a few hundred years. Li Mayan said to Wang Xian from the side. A few hundred years? A 7-leaf meritorious serviceman? Wang Xian smiled when he heard her words. Based on the accumulation of military merits, if he wanted to become a person with 7 leaves of merit, he would have to kill at least 4 experts of eternal shocking thunder. Or he could hand over 2 divine weapons that could rival 7 wisps of divine fire. This requirement was not low, but it was not very high either. After all, The ninth elder and the rest were almost certain that the divine weapons that Wang Xian obtained could at least rival 8 or 9 wisps of divine fire. Sure! Wang Xian nodded his head faintly. He had his own thoughts and criteria. He would repay eternal shocking thunder for what he owed them this time. Buzz! Buzz! At this moment, a sorrowful atmosphere spread across the entire continent. They are paying their respects to Master Fang and the rest. Li Mayan and the rest had solemn expressions on their faces. The death of 2 masters with 8 wisps of divine fire was no small matter to eternal shocking thunder. Let's go and pay our respects, Wang Xian said to them. Okay. Li Mayan and the rest nodded their heads and immediately flew towards the place where they were paying their respects. They landed on the ground ahead of time. The people at the entrance didn't stop them. Li Mayan and the rest had some status in eternal divine leaf. The atmosphere was solemn when they entered. A few hundred people were gathered inside, and half of them were the gods of eternal thunderclap. At the front, there was a row of people kneeling. They were the relatives of the 2 fallen powerhouses. Wang Xian and the rest entered and bowed towards the memorial tablet. They stood quietly at the side. 10 minutes later, the pantheon slowly left, leaving behind a row of people kneeling in front. Wang Xian was not staying here either. Young Master Wang, you can leave first. Let's go comfort a friend, Li Mayan said to him and walked towards the front. Okay. Wang Xian nodded and walked out. Stop right there. However, when Wang Xian reached the door, a cold shout came from the back. When Wang Xian heard the voice coming towards him, he frowned slightly and turned his head to look at the back. A young man stared at him coldly. Beside the young man, Li Mayan and the rest were standing beside him with unpleasant expressions. Wang Xian stopped his footsteps and looked at the young man who was walking towards him with a slight frown. Did you cause the death of my grandfather? The young man had a hint of anger on his face as he stared at him coldly. You should know how he died. Looking at the aggressive young man, Wang Xian frowned slightly. Fang Muqing, it's not like you didn't. Shut up! Li Mayan opened her mouth to explain to Wang Xian, but the young man immediately shouted at her. Her expression changed as she looked at the young man. It was obvious that she was afraid of him. My grandfather sacrificed himself for that treasure. However, my grandfather and the rest thought that the one who got the treasure was someone from Eternal Thunderclap. However, he didn't know that it was an outsider. It's all because of you. If it wasn't for you, my grandfather and the rest wouldn't have died. Since my grandfather died for that treasure, hand over that treasure now. The young man stared at Wang Xian and said sternly. Hand over the treasure to you? Wang Xian was slightly taken aback. He stared at him as if he was looking at an idiot and said faintly, You want me to give this treasure to you because of your grandfather's death? This treasure was created by my grandfather with his life, the young man said coldly. His eyes sparkled as he said, Don't worry, I will give you some compensation. Hand over the treasure now. Idiot, even the experts of your eternal divine leaves didn't ask me to hand it over. Do you think I will hand it over with just a word from you? Wang Xian stared at the young man in amusement. His face was filled with disdain. You! Do you know who I am? When the young man heard Wang Xian's words, a vicious look appeared on his face as he spoke in a sinister tone. I don't care who you are. Wang Xian looked at him coldly. Fang Muqing, the adults have already decided on something. Forget it. At the side, a girl spoke to the young man. Meng Muqing, could it be that your master has fallen? Are you really that willing? Fang Muqing stared at the lady beside him and growled in a low voice with an extremely embarrassed expression. So what if I'm unwilling? Only by becoming stronger can I avenge my master, Meng Muqing said coldly. I don't blame you for this, but I hope you can kill a few more of those bastards from the Eternal Thunderclap in the future. As she spoke, she looked at Wang Xian before turning around and walking towards the memorial tablet. You better hand over that treasure. When Fang Muqing saw her leaving, he glared at Wang Xian fiercely. Hee hee! Wang Xian smiled in disdain before turning around and leaving. When Li Mayan and the rest saw this scene, they frowned slightly. Shaking their heads, they walked towards Meng Muxing's location. Dragon King, that Fan Muxing's status might not be low. I saw that the ninth elder of the Eternal Divine Leaf was very polite to him before he left. After walking out of the courtyard where they were worshipping, Minghua and Yanghua, who were following behind him, said to Wang Xian, "What's there to worry about a guy who hasn't ignited the divine fire?" Wang Xian said indifferently. He didn't take it seriously at all. "Let's go to the energy tide. I don't like to owe others a favor." As Wang Xian spoke, he immediately flew toward the energy tide. With the incorporeal holy wings, Wang Xian was prepared to stay here for a period of time to obtain some resources and treasures. The main purpose of his trip this time was to obtain resources and treasures. As for the two little girls, let them wait a little longer. Chapter 2067 2067 I have a predestined relationship with this treasure. It's him. That treasure ended up in his hands. It seems to be a pair of bone wings. Wings are a rare artifact. His speed was terrifying just now. The level of that treasure must be very high. This time, this person has made a huge profit. When Wang Xian came to the edge of the energy tide, some people looked over and whispered with curiosity. Ignoring the discussions around him, Wang Xian came to the edge of the energy tide and looked at the vast energy tide. "Dragon King, are we really going to stay here for a few hundred years to complete our military exploits before leaving?" Minghua and Yanghua looked at the energy tide in front of them with a hint of bitterness on their faces. "A few hundred years? At most, we'll stay here for a year." Wang Xian scanned his surroundings. He wanted to stay here for a year to see how many treasures he could obtain. If there were many treasures, he could consider staying here for a few more years. Squeak, squeak! Wang Xian moved his palm and the treasure-seeking ant appeared in his hand. He placed it on his shoulder and looked at the vast energy tide in front of him quietly. "The main task is to explore the energy tide in front of us." Wang Xian gave an order to the treasure-seeking ant. Squeak, squeak! The tentacles of the treasure-seeking ant were all pointed in the direction of the energy tide. Wang Xian hovered in the sky and waited quietly. "This? What is the Dragon King doing?" Minghua and Yanghua looked at the Dragon King who was standing there quietly with a dumbfounded expression. They did not dare to ask or say anything. They stood to the left and right of Wang Xian and similarly hovered quietly in the air. "The water spirit pearl at the level of a demigod at level 8 has been discovered." In less than 5 minutes, a piece of information appeared in Wang Xian's mind. Following that, an image appeared in his mind. Wang Xian raised his head and looked over. The water spirit pearl at the level of a demigod at level 8 was not considered a valuable treasure, but it was still considered pretty good. Moreover, the water spirit pearl was only about 20 kilometers away from him. Wang Xian waved his arm and an energy claw directly grabbed towards the ocean tide in front of him. Splash! Very soon, the claw entered the energy tide and grabbed the water spirit pearl. Eh? The water spirit pearl is of quite a high level. That person has actually obtained the water spirit pearl. Around the ocean tide, at least a few 100 million people were either cultivating or observing the tide to see if there were any treasures. When they saw Wang Xian taking out a water spirit pearl, some of them looked envious. "It's so far away. You can see it even from the ocean tide?" Minghua and Yanghua were a little dumbfounded. "A water spirit pearl with a demigod rank 8 is not even worth a single leaf of military merit." Wang Xian held the water spirit pearl and placed it in a separate interspatial ring. "I have found a level 5 demigod ice slurry." In less than 5 minutes, another piece of news came. Wang Xian raised his eyebrows and extended his arm again. Whoosh! Whoosh! Soon, the level 5 demigod ice slurry appeared in his hand. "I got another one. Damn, his eyes are so sharp. This lord is someone who can enter the center of the ocean tide. His strength is at least 7 wisps of divine fire. How can he not be powerful?" A few people who were closer to Wang Xian said enviously when they saw that he had caught another treasure. We have discovered a water treasure at the peak of the demigod level. More than 10 minutes later, the information of the treasure-seeking ant was transmitted over again. This water treasure was relatively far away and was close to eternal thunderclap. Wang Xian narrowed his eyes slightly. With a wave of his arm, a claw instantly pierced through the space of a few hundred kilometers and grabbed the water treasure at the peak of the demigod level from the water. What? Damn, how could those guys from the Eternal Divine Leaves discover our treasure? At this moment, in the sky above the energy tide, a middle-aged man had already discovered the water treasure. He was filled with excitement and wanted to go and retrieve it. However, before he could make a move, a claw grabbed it and flew towards the opposite direction. His expression changed drastically and he couldn't help but curse. Damn, this works! Isn't this heaven-defying? Does he have any eye bloodline techniques? He can even discover the treasures on the opposite side. A peak-stage demigod water treasure. This is a good thing. It's very helpful in igniting the divine fire. Everyone in the surrounding area widened their eyes and revealed an incredulous expression. It hasn't even been half an hour, and you've already caught 3 treasures. What the hell, do you have to be so fast? What was worse was that the water treasure was obtained from somewhere close to the eternal thunderbolt. How did he discover it? One had to know that even though an expert could see clearly at such a distance, it was impossible for a treasure to see the treasures within the ocean tide. I'm rich! When Ming Huiyanghua saw this scene, he widened his eyes and revealed an extremely heated expression. Eh? At this moment, Wang Xian squinted his eyes slightly and a hint of surprise flashed across his face. The water snake sword that has discovered a wisp of divine fire. There are so many treasures here. Wang Xian's face was filled with surprise. A divine sword that resembled a water snake was located at the center of the energy tide. The water snake sword was only more than a meter long. It was difficult to discover it as it was located within the ocean tide. His body moved, and he flew directly toward the center of the energy tide. A divine artifact, he needed to do it himself. I can sense it. I can sense the aura of a divine artifact. At this moment, the 2 water-type gods in the surrounding area revealed extremely excited expressions. Their bodies moved, and they flew directly to the sky above the energy tide, opening their eyes wide as they carefully sensed it. Many people had their own techniques to search for treasures within this energy tide. Some of the gods with the corresponding attributes could still sense the faint fluctuations of a divine fire divine artifact. However, they weren't able to immediately find the exact location. After all, finding an item that was 1 or 2 meters in size within this vast energy tide was akin to finding a needle in a haystack. There's a divine weapon! At the opposite location of eternal thunderclap, some people were also flying towards the sky above the energy tide. While they were carefully observing the energy tide, they were also vigilantly staring at some of the gods of the eternal divine leaf. Whoosh! At this moment, Wang Xian had already arrived above the water snake sword and was casually fishing for a divine weapon with a wisp of divine fire. The water snake sword that possessed spiritual energy wanted to attack Wang Xian, but it was easily subdued by him. Holding the water snake sword in his hand, Wang Xian flew directly toward the shore. What? How is this possible? What a fast speed! Everyone was still searching for the divine weapon. In the end, someone had already taken it away. This caused them to be astonished. Regardless of whether it was the people from Eternal Thunderclap or the disciples of Eternal Divine Leaf, all of them looked at Wang Xian in astonishment. I am fated to be with this treasure! Wang Xian saw that everyone around him was focusing their attention on him. He spoke faintly and entered everyone's ears. I am fated to be with this treasure? Who is he trying to fool? Why am I not fated to be with this treasure? Wang Xian flew to the shore and looked at the water snake sword in his hand. The sword radiance was flickering and revealed its sharpness. It was a good sword. 1 stroke of the water snake sword can make me a 2-leaf military meritorious practitioner. Wang Xian smiled faintly. Chapter 2068. 2068. I have a predestined relationship with this treasure 3. That Lord has such a terrifying perception. Has it been an hour? He seems to have obtained quite a number of treasures. He seems to be a water attribute cultivator with special abilities. It just so happens that it's the ocean tide now. That's why he was able to find so many treasures with such precision. On the north side of the energy tide, everyone had astonished looks on their faces when they saw Wang Xian holding the water snake sword artifact. The two gods who flew above the energy tide had a change of expression as they flew back. This seems to be formed naturally. It should be a sword formed by a water snake due to special reasons. The universe is really magical. Wang Xian placed the water snake sword into his interspatial ring and stood there waiting quietly. Time passed slowly once again. Some people in the surroundings would look over curiously from time to time. I have found a metal material of a demigod level 3. Whoosh. In less than 10 minutes, the treasure-seeking ant sent a message. Wang Xian waved his arm and grabbed a piece of metal material that was located at the edge of the ocean tide. Although the entire metal material was only at the level of a demigod level 3, it was about 4 to 5 cubic meters in size. If it was used to forge weapons, it could be used to forge dozens of pieces. He got another treasure? A metal material, and it's even at the level of a demigod. That Lord is so powerful. How long has it been? 10 minutes? He got some more treasures. Is this demigod-level material fated with him too? Wang Xian's consecutive acquisition of some treasures had already attracted the attention of many people. When they saw that he got another piece of metal material 10 minutes later, all of them widened their eyes slightly. This was fate with the metal material? Wang Xian's expression didn't change at all when he saw the astonishment of the people around him. He stood there quietly and didn't hide anything. He couldn't hide such a situation either. Since he could hide it for 1 day and couldn't hide it for 2 days, he might as well not hide anything at all. In any case, this treasure was fated to be with him. In the next 10 hours or so, he didn't encounter any divine artifact-level treasure. However, there was a demigod-grade treasure every 10 minutes or so. It could be a weapon, material, water spirit pearl, or the like. Even though Wang Xian did not obtain any more divine weapons, he kept obtaining treasures one after another, which left everyone dumbfounded. Even some of the people from Eternal Thunderclap stared at him with embarrassed expressions. When they saw the claw flying towards them, they immediately launched an attack. However, in these 10 hours, Wang Xian was completely famous. In these 10 hours, he obtained an average of 6 demigod-level treasures every hour. In these 10 hours, these demigod-level treasures were worth a lot of money. Very soon, news of this matter spread quickly. More and more people came to this place and looked at the calm figure in front of them. Mu Xian, you've eaten too little. Eat a little more. If Lord Ming finds out that you're like this, his heart will ache. You're his only disciple. You must live well. In a restaurant floating in the air on the northern side of the energy tide, Li Mayan, Meng Muxin, and the others were sitting at the dining table. Seeing that Meng Muxin rarely ate, Li Mayan said with concern, "Don't worry." Meng Muxin nodded and forced out a smile. "It's a pity that Lord Meng's interspatial ring and God Country were obtained by those damn guys. If these treasures were still there. Damn it! Bang!" Li Mulong frowned and said. Before he could finish his words, the young man slammed the table heavily and growled angrily. "Fang Muqing, you should be more open-minded," Li Mayan whispered from the side. "Have you heard? The god who obtained the supreme treasure is now exploring the treasure before the energy tide. He will obtain a demigod-level treasure at least every 10 minutes. It seems that he has also obtained a divine weapon. When I came back just now, that lord was indeed quite powerful. In the past 10 hours he has obtained at least 70 or 80 demigod-level treasures, right? He's simply too powerful. If he's always there, wouldn't he be making a fortune?" Right at this moment, a lively discussion rang out from within the restaurant. When Fang Muqing heard the discussion, his eyes flashed with a cold light as he instantly stood up. Who's the person you're talking about? His gaze was cold as he questioned the people who had spoken just now, his body emitting an intense murderous aura. Oh? You brat. Young Master Fang. The expressions of the middle-aged men who had spoken changed slightly when they heard his question. However, when they saw Fang Muqing's face, they immediately squeezed out a smile. Young Master Fang, it's that young man who obtained that supreme treasure yesterday. It's him. He has obtained many treasures now. The middle-aged men immediately said. Let's go and take a look. Fang Muqing heard their words and said to Li Mayan and the others. Then, he walked straight towards the location of the energy tide. Li Mayan, Li Mulong, and the others' faces were filled with doubt. After hesitating for a moment, they stood up and followed behind him. Young Master Fang seems to have some opinions about that lord. Of course he has opinions. His grandfather died because he was fighting for that treasure. Moreover, I heard that Lord Fang Tian was building a divine kingdom for young Master Fang when he was alive. Once the divine kingdom is built and the divine fire is ignited to become a god, young Master Fang will be able to change from an in-name disciple to a disciple. This is that person's personal disciple. He has reached the sky in a single step. With his talent, he is indeed qualified to be that lord's disciple. Fan Shaoqing from the east is not called for nothing. Seeing Fang Muqing and the rest leaving, some people in the restaurant whispered among themselves. We finally encountered something good. In front of the energy tide, Wang Xian suddenly raised his eyebrows. Looking at the information in his mind, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Whoosh! He immediately flew toward the center of the energy tide. Has this sir discovered a powerful treasure? It must be. He has been using his energy claws to grab it. Now that he is flying over personally, it must be a powerful treasure. Could it be a divine artifact? The moment Wang Xian flew out, the people who had been watching him revealed a look of astonishment. Splash! At this moment, everyone could hear the crisp sound of water flowing in front of the energy tide. That is? A divine weapon! Another divine weapon! Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and saw a 2-meter-long wooden sailboat suddenly drilling out of the water from the energy tide. The wooden sailboat was emitting a powerful divine glow and attracted everyone's attention. A divine artifact with at least 4 or 5 wisps of divine fire. A god's eyes lit up as he shouted loudly. What? A wooden sailboat with at least 4 or 5 wisps of divine fire appearing on the ocean tide? Fang Muqing and the others, who had just rushed over, immediately looked forward when they heard the voice. Chapter 2069. 2069 Fate with this treasure for. A wooden sailboat appeared above the ocean tide. It drilled out of the water and gave off a green luster. The luster covered a radius of about 10 kilometers, and it was exceptionally clear on the ocean tide. A powerful divine artifact appeared, and the eye-catching divine light made everyone around look excited. The gods with 6 or 7 wisps of divine fire immediately flew towards the ocean tide. On the opposite side, Eternal Shocking Thunder and the other experts also flew towards the ocean tide. A wooden sailboat. This is definitely a powerful divine artifact for us would attribute cultivators. When Fang Muqing saw the divine artifact on the ocean tide, his eyes revealed an incomparably hot expression. Without any hesitation, he spread out his arms, and a wooden wing appeared on his back. Whoosh! 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 Thistle after thistle sounded, and he flew into the energy tide at a terrifying speed. As one of the top geniuses of the eternal thunderclap, even if he hadn't ignited the divine fire yet, his speed was still not slower than a god with a wisp of divine fire. However, there were too many gods that were flying over. There were also quite a number of gods with 6 or 7 wisps. At the location of Eternal Thunderclap, there were even 7 or 8 god-level powerhouses with wisps of divine fire flying over. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm fated to have this treasure. At this moment, Wang Xian, who was the first to fly out, sensed that there were at least tens of thousands of people flying over from the front and behind. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the wooden sailboat that was only a few thousand meters away. He said faintly. His voice spread across a radius of a few hundred kilometers. Every powerhouse who was flying in his direction could hear it clearly. "Fuck off, you are fated to be with this treasure. Die!" At the front, the 5 or 6 gods who were flying at the front heard Wang Xian's words. Their faces were filled with cold, killing intent. The ultimate sound of thunder! Crack, crack, crack! An explosive sound was heard. It was as if the void had exploded. A bolt of lightning extended directly toward Wang Xian. 5 bolts of lightning! Crack! An attack came and another cold cry rang out. 5 bolts of heavenly lightning covered the sky. Bolts of lightning that were at least 100 meters thick struck towards Wang Xian. Buzz! Wang Xian looked at the attacks one after another. A faint smile appeared on his face. His body shook. A huge uninitiated holy wings appeared behind him. The wings flapped slightly and easily evaded the attacks. At the same time, Wang Xian's palm turned into a dragon claw and clawed at the wooden sailboat below. Crash! The dragon claw held the sailboat. Wang Xian's wings fluttered slightly and left a trail as he flew toward the edge. I've already said that I'm fated to obtain this treasure. Why are you all here to fight over it? The incorporeal holy wing trembled. Wang Xian's speed had reached a terrifying level. Before anyone could react, he returned to his original position. A 1-meter-long sailboat appeared in his hand and he sized it up carefully. A wood-type divine weapon with 5 wisps of divine fire! Wang Xian looked at the sailboat in his hand and muttered. Hiss, what a terrifying speed! Such speed, even a god with 9 wisps of divine fire can't compare to it, right? That divine weapon has been obtained by him again. This speed is simply too terrifying. Is it because of the bone wings on his back? This divine weapon is at least at the level of 9 wisps of divine fire, right? Everyone was shocked when they saw Wang Xian standing there quietly with the divine weapon in his hand. Damn it, don't let us meet you! The furious roars of the eternal thunderclap experts could be heard from the opposite side. A divine weapon with 5 wisps of divine fire could be equivalent to a god with 5 wisps of divine fire when fully utilized. This speed is too fast! The group of gods from the eternal divine leaves flew back and looked at Wang Xian. Their eyes sparkled with astonishment. They looked at the bone wings that were slowly disappearing behind Wang Xian. Their eyes were burning with passion. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, Fang Muqing flew over and stared at Wang Xian with an embarrassed expression. He stood in front of Wang Xian and stared at the spot behind him. Is this the treasure that my grandfather and the rest exchanged for with their lives? He stared at Wang Xian with a gloomy face and growled in a low voice. Wang Xian glanced at him indifferently and ignored him. Instead, he studied the wooden sailboat in his hand. Buzz! With a move of his hand, the wooden sailboat turned into a few thousand meters in size and floated in the air like a void ship. There was a divine tree in the middle of the sailboat that was emitting a mystical luster. It was a pretty good treasure. This divine artifact! The majestic wood-type vitality caused all the wood-type cultivators in the surroundings to reveal burning expressions on their faces. Fang Muqing's gaze was attracted. Looking at the powerful energy contained within the sailboat, his breathing quickened. I want this treasure. Name a price! Fang Muqing immediately roared in a low voice. Fang Muqing wants to buy that divine artifact. A divine artifact that looks like a sailboat is very rare. This divine artifact is very special. It definitely has a unique ability and is more valuable than other divine artifacts of the same level. With Fang Muqing's strength and background, even if he buys it, he would probably go bankrupt, right? When the surrounding people saw this scene, they whispered among themselves. Wait, this lord, I also want to buy it. At this moment, another voice sounded. Oh? Fang Muqing was slightly stunned and immediately turned his head to look. It's Li Muley and the others. Many of our eternal thunderclaps, heaven's favored sons, have come. Li Mayan, Li Mulong, Meng Muxin, Fang Muqing, and now even Li Muli, Yuan, and Fang Qing have come. Some of the youths were slightly shocked when they saw the youths walking over, and they whispered amongst themselves. These people were all elites of their generation, elites that had suppressed their eastern region. Why are you all here? Meng Muxin saw the few of them and frowned slightly. Clearly, the two sides were not on good terms. I'm here to comfort Sister Muxin. I'm also here to look for some treasures. One of the women looked at Meng Muxin mockingly. Sister Mu Xian, your master has fallen. I wonder when your divine kingdom will be completed. Don't tell me you're going to build a divine kingdom randomly. The woman continued to speak to Meng Muxin. Meng Muxin took a deep breath and turned his head to the side. He ignored her. The woman felt bored when she saw Meng Muxin ignoring him. She looked at the wooden sailboat in Wang Xian's hand with a burning gaze. Sir, may I know how much this divine weapon of yours is for sale? He asked Wang Xian. Li Muli, Yuan Fang Qing, this divine weapon is mine. Fang Muqing looked at them and said with a cold expression. Shouldn't the competition be fair? Li Muli looked at Fang Muqing indifferently. I'm in a bad mood. You guys better not provoke me. Fang Muqing stared at them with a stern expression. Fang Muqing, you're just that lord's unnamed disciple now. It's not certain if you can pass the assessment, especially after your grandfather died. So, don't think that you can threaten us. Li Muli stared at him coldly as well. Wang Xian looked at the heaven's favorites of the eternal divine leaves who were at loggerheads with him and felt a little amused. This treasure is fated with you. I'll give it to you. He looked at Meng Muxin slowly and directly floated the sailboat in his hand to her side. Wang Xian suddenly opened his mouth and gave the sailboat with 5 wisps of divine fire to Meng Muxin. Everyone around was stunned and looked shocked. What was going on? You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.